On my birthday, my wife and kids hosted a dinner with 100 friends and relatives just to divorce and disown me. My wife ripped my wedding pictures off the wall. My son handed me a bill for $148,000. Last chance to be useful, pay for my college, or never contact us again. My daughter grabbed my car keys from the table. Mom already transferred the title to May. They even brought my manager to fire me on the spot as I stood there in silence. I walked out without a word. 4 days later, they're calling me. They say, "Your birthday is supposed to be the one day a year when people celebrate that you exist, that you matter, that the world is somehow better because you're in it." I should have known something was wrong when Sarah insisted on throwing me a party. We'd been married for 23 years, and in all that time, she'd never once organized a birthday celebration for me. Not a surprise party, not a dinner, not even a cake from the grocery store with my name misspelled in blue frosting. My birthdays were quiet affairs. Maybe takeout from my favorite Thai place, maybe not. I'd learned not to expect much. Learned to tell myself that birthdays were for children anyway, that grown men didn't need validation in the form of candles and singing. But this year was different. This year, Sarah had been planning for weeks.
"It's your 50th, she'd said, looking up from her laptop one evening in late September. "That's a milestone. We should do something special."
I'd looked at her, then really looked at her, trying to read the expression on her face. Her eyes were on the screen, her fingers moving across the keyboard with practice efficiency. She'd started her own interior design business 5 years ago, and it had taken off faster than either of us expected.
She was always busy now, always distracted, always somewhere else,
Even when she was sitting right next to me. "You don't have to do that," I'd said. "We could just go out to dinner, the four of us." "The four of us," she'd repeated, and something in her voice made my chest tighten. "James, when was the last time the four of us did anything together?" I didn't have an answer for that. Our son Marcus was 21, finishing his senior year at a state university 3 hours away. Our daughter Lily was 19, taking a gap year to find herself, which apparently meant living in our house rentree while working part-time at a coffee shop and spending the rest of her time on TikTok. They were both adults now, technically, but they still felt like strangers to me. Strangers who lived in my house, ate my food, and looked at me with something I couldn't quite name when we passed each other in the hallway. Disappointment, maybe? Or worse, indifference.
"I think a party would be nice," Sarah had continued. "Something big. Invite all our friends, your colleagues, family. Make it a real celebration." I should have said no. Should have trusted my instincts. The small voice in the back of my mind that whispered, "This doesn't feel right." But I'd learned to ignore that voice over the years, learned to doubt myself, to assume that my hesitation was just anxiety or paranoia or the general malaise of middle age. So I'd said yes. And now here I was, standing in the ballroom of the Riverside Inn, surrounded by 100 people I barely recognized, wondering why my wife was looking at me like she was about to deliver a eulogy. The space was beautiful. I had to give Sarah credit for that. She'd transformed the room into something elegant and warm. White tablecloths, gold accents, centerpieces with autumn flowers in deep reds and oranges. String lights hung from the ceiling, casting everything in a soft, flattering glow. A banner stretched across the back wall. "Happy 50th birthday, James." Everyone was here. My brother Tom and his wife, Sarah's parents, her sisters, colleagues from the accounting firm where I'd worked for the past 15 years, neighbors, people from the gym, people I'd met once at a barbecue 7 years ago and hadn't spoken to since. The room hummed with conversation and laughter, and I stood at the center of it all, feeling like an actor who'd forgotten his lines. Marcus and Lily were near the bar, their heads bent together in whispered conversation. They'd barely acknowledged me when I arrived. A quick, "Hey, Dad," from Marcus. Nothing from Lily except a glance and a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. Sarah was working the room like a politician, moving from table to table with her wine glass in hand,
her laugh bright and performative.
She was wearing a black dress I'd never seen before, something expensive, probably with a designer label that meant nothing to me but everything to her. Her hair was styled differently too, swept back from her face in a way that made her look severe. Beautiful, but severe. I felt a hand on my shoulder and turned to find my brother Tom standing there, his expression somewhere between concern and confusion. "Hell of a party," he said, glancing around the room. "You doing okay?" "Yeah," I lied. "Just overwhelmed, I guess. Wasn't expecting something this big." Tom studied my face for a moment, and I wondered what he saw there. We'd never been particularly close. He was younger than me by 5 years, had his own family, his own life, but we'd always maintained a sort of cordial distance, brotherly obligation without the mess of real intimacy. "Sarah went all out," he said carefully. "Must have cost a fortune." I'd thought the same thing. The venue alone probably ran several thousand, not to mention the catering, the flowers, the open bar. We had money. I made decent money at the firm, and Sarah's business was doing well, but this level of extravagance seemed unnecessary, suspicious even. If you've ever felt like you're the only person who doesn't understand what's happening in your own life, you'll know what I mean when I say that the next hour felt like watching a movie where everyone else had read the script. People kept approaching me with strange expressions, sympathy mixed with curiosity, like they were visiting someone in a hospital. They'd shake my hand or pat my shoulder and say things like, "Hang in there," or "You'll get through this," or "Stay strong, buddy." I smiled and nodded and pretended to understand what they were talking about. But inside, I felt like I was drowning. What were they talking about? Get through what? At 7 o'clock, Sarah clink-ticked a knife against her wine glass, and the room fell silent. She was standing near the front of the room now, positioned in front of the birthday banner. The lights seemed to intensify around her. Or maybe that was just my imagination. Marcus and Lily had joined her, one on each side, and the three of them looked like a portrait of a family. The kind of portrait where the father has been carefully edited out of the frame. "Thank you all so much for coming," Sarah said, her voice clear and confident. "It means the world to me, to us, that you're here tonight to celebrate this important occasion." Celebrate? The word echoed in my head like a warning bell. "James," she continued, her eyes finding mine across the room, "would you come up here, please?" Every eye in the room turned to look at me. I felt my face flush hot, felt my hands start to tremble. I wanted to run, wanted to disappear through the floor or melt into the wallpaper or do anything except walk to the front of that room and stand next to my family, who were looking at me now with expressions I couldn't read. But I walked anyway, one foot in front of the other. The crowd parted to let me through, and I could feel their eyes on me, could hear the whispers starting up like static. I reached the front of the room and stood there awkward and uncertain, while Sarah smiled at me with something that looked like pity. "Marriage," she began, "is supposed to be a partnership, a union of equals. Two people working together to build a life, to raise children, to create something meaningful." The room was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. "But sometimes," Sarah continued, "you wake up one day and realize that you've been carrying the weight of that partnership alone. That you've been the one working, sacrificing, planning for the future while your partner—" She paused, letting the silence stretch. "While your partner checked out years ago." My stomach dropped. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Sarah turned to look at me fully now, and her eyes were hard. "James, we need to be honest with each other, with our children, with everyone here who loves us and has supported us over the years." "Sarah," I managed, but she held up her hand. "I'm done," she said simply. "We're done. This marriage is over." The words hit me like a physical blow. I staggered back a step, and someone in the crowd gasped. My mind was racing, trying to process what was happening, but everything felt distant and unreal. This couldn't be happening. Not here, not like this. "Mom already filed the papers," Lily said, her voice cutting through my shock.
She stepped forward, pulling something from her purse, a manila envelope thick with documents.
She's been planning this for 6 months. We all have.
Marcus nodded, his face carefully neutral. We wanted to do this all at once, get everything out in the open, no more pretending. I looked around the room desperately, searching for a friendly face, someone who might speak up on my behalf, or at least look confused by what was happening. But everyone was just watching, and waiting like this was some kind of performance they'd paid admission to see.
I don't understand, I said, and my voice sounded small and pathetic even to my own ears. Sarah, can we talk about this privately? There's nothing to talk about, she replied. I've made my decision. The kids have made theirs. What does that mean? I asked, looking from Marcus to Lily. What decision? Marcus stepped forward then, and I noticed for the first time that he was holding a piece of paper. He unfolded it slowly, deliberately, like he was savoring the moment. This is an invoice, he said. For my college expenses, tuition, room and board, books, living expenses for 4 years. The total comes to $148,000. He held the paper out to me and I took it automatically, my hands shaking so badly the numbers blurred together. We are giving you one last chance to be useful, Marcus continued, his voice flat and businesslike. Pay for my education or never contact any of us again. Those are your options. I stared at him, this young man who I'd held as a baby, who I'd taught to ride a bike, who I'd stayed up with all night when he had pneumonia at age 7. I searched his face for some trace of the boy he'd been, some flicker of love or recognition or something, but there was nothing, just cold calculation. Marcus, I whispered. I'm your father. You're a sperm donor, he replied. There's a difference. Lily laughed, actually laughed, and reached across the table behind her to grab something. My car keys, the ones to my Audi. The car I'd bought 3 years ago, the one thing I'd purchased for myself after decades of putting everyone else's needs first. Mom already transferred the title to me, she said, dangling the keys in front of my face. The car is mine now. Consider it back payment for 18 years of emotional neglect. Emotional neglect, I repeated numbly. Lily, I save it. She cut me off. We're not interested in your excuses anymore. We're not interested in you. Period. Sarah cleared her throat. There's one more thing, she said, and gestured toward the back of the room. I turned to see Gary Henderson, my manager from the firm, making his way through the crowd. He looked uncomfortable, actually. He looked miserable, but he kept walking until he was standing right in front of me. James, he said quietly. I'm sorry, this is not how I wanted to do this. Do what? I asked, though some part of me already knew. You're being let go, Gary said, not quite meeting my eyes. Effective immediately. There have been complaints about your work performance, your attitude, He trailed off, glancing at Sarah. The board felt it would be best if we parted ways. The room was spinning now. Divorce, disownment, financial demands, my car taken, and now my job. The job I'd held for 15 years. The job I'd poured myself into, working 60-hour weeks, skipping vacations, missing family dinners, because there was always one more client to call, one more report to file. Gone. All of it gone. I stood there in front of 100 people, friends, family, colleagues, and felt myself disappearing. Felt myself becoming less than nothing. A ghost, a mistake, a man-shaped hole where a person used to be. Sarah stepped forward and did something I'll never forget as long as I live. She reached up and pulled our wedding photo off the wall behind her. I hadn't even noticed it there. Hadn't seen that she'd hung it up among the birthday decorations like some kind of sick joke. And she ripped it in half slowly, deliberately. The sound of tearing paper was the loudest thing in the room.
She let the pieces fall to the floor at my feet. "We're done pretending you matter," she said softly. "Go." And I did. I walked out of that ballroom without saying a word, without defending myself, without fighting back or demanding answers or doing any of the things a stronger man might have done. I just walked down the hall, through the lobby, out into the parking lot where the October air was cold and sharp and clean. I stood there in the dark, shaking, trying to breathe, trying to understand how my entire life had just been destroyed in the space of 20 minutes. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Sarah. "Don't come home. Your things will be boxed up tomorrow. We'll let you know where to pick them up." I got in my car, except it wasn't my car anymore, was it? It belonged to Lily now. Everything belonged to someone else now. My marriage, my children, my job, my possessions, even my identity as a father, a husband, a provider. All of it stripped away in front of a cheering crowd. I drove to a hotel on the edge of town and checked in with a credit card I hoped still worked. The room was small and impersonal, exactly what I deserved, apparently. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall and waited to feel something. Anger, grief, rage. But all I felt was hollow. I didn't sleep that night. Didn't cry, didn't call anyone or post on social media or do any of the things people do when their world falls apart. I just sat there in the dark, watching the hours tick by on the digital clock and wondered what I'd done to deserve this. What had I done? What had I missed? What signs had I ignored? What conversations had I avoided? What moments of connection had I let slip away until there was nothing left but contempt? 4 days later, they started calling. But that's a story for later. Right now, in this moment, sitting in that hotel room with my life in pieces around me, I made a decision. Not a dramatic one, not a vengeful one, just a simple, quiet decision. I decided I wasn't going to disappear. They say silence is golden, but that's only true when you choose it. When silence is thrust upon you, when it's all you have left after everything else has been taken away, it becomes something else entirely. A weight, a presence, a mirror that forces you to look at yourself and see all the ways you failed. I spent the first day in that hotel room doing nothing. Not nothing in the productive sense, not meditating or thinking or planning my next move. I mean, actual nothing. I lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling tiles, counting them over and over again until the numbers lost meaning. 48 tiles, or was it 50? I'd count again and get a different number, and I'd wonder if I was losing my mind or if I'd already lost it and was only just now noticing. The room smelled like industrial cleaner and someone else's cigarette smoke, even though it was supposed to be non-smoking. The walls were beige, the carpet was beige. The curtains were a slightly different shade of beige, as if someone had said, "We need variety," and then given up halfway through the thought. Everything was designed to be forgettable, and I fit right in. My phone sat on the nightstand, screen dark like a small black hole that I couldn't quite bring myself to look at directly. I knew there would be messages, probably from Sarah's lawyer, maybe from the firm, asking me to come collect my personal effects from my office. The coffee mug Marcus had made for me in 3rd grade. The photo of our family from a ski trip in 2010, back when Lily still smiled at me, back when we looked like people who loved each other. I didn't check the phone. If you've ever been in that space between one life and the next, that liminal zone where you're not who you were anymore, but you haven't figured out who you're going to be, you'll understand why I couldn't look at that phone. Because once I looked, once I engaged with the practical realities of my situation, it would all become real. The divorce papers, the severance package, if there even was one, the logistics of homelessness and unemployment, and starting over at 50 years old with nothing. So I didn't look, not that day. Instead, I thought about my father. He died when I was 27, just a few months before Marcus was born. Heart attack at 62. Sudden and brutal. 1 minute he was mowing the lawn and the next he was gone. I'd been terrified that I'd die the same way that Marcus would grow up with only hazy memories of me, if that. So I'd gone to the doctor, gotten checked out, started taking medication for my cholesterol. I'd done everything right, everything responsible. I'd extended my life so I could be there for my son. For what? So he could stand in front of 100 people and tell me I was nothing more than a sperm donor? My father had been a hard man. Not cruel, exactly, but distant, emotionally unavailable, as the therapists say. He worked in construction, came home covered in dust and sweat, and sat in his chair watching television until he fell asleep. He never hit me, never yelled much, never did anything you could point to and say, that's abuse. He was just absent. Present in body, but gone everywhere else that mattered. I'd sworn I wouldn't be like him. I'd sworn I'd be different. And yet here I was accused of the same crimes. Emotional neglect, checking out, being there but not really being there. Had I done that? Was Marcus right? The question circled my brain like a vulture looking for something dead to feed on. I thought about all the times I'd come home late from work, exhausted, and Marcus had wanted to show me something, a drawing, a Lego creation, a new trick on his skateboard. Had I really looked? Had I engaged? Or had I just nodded and said, "That's great, buddy"? While thinking about the Henderson account or the Myers audit or the 1,000 other things that seemed so urgent at the time, I thought about Lily's dance recital, the ones I'd missed because of client dinners or tax season deadlines. She'd been upset. I remembered that she'd cried and said I didn't care about her. And I'd said, of course I cared. I was working to provide for her, to give her a good life. And Sarah had smoothed it over, had made excuses for me, had told Lily that Daddy was doing important work. When had Sarah stopped making those excuses? When had she stopped believing them herself? The second day I got out of bed. It was a small victory, but it felt monumental. My legs were shaky, like I'd been sick for a long time. My mouth tasted like something had died in it. I shuffled to the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. And what I saw there made me take a physical step backward. The man in the mirror was old. Not just older, I'd accepted aging, accepted the gray in my hair and the lines around my eyes. But this man looked ancient, hollowed out. There were dark circles under his eyes, so deep they looked like bruises. His skin was gray, his shoulders slumped forward in a posture of defeat so complete it looked permanent. This was me now. This was what I'd become. I showered for 45 minutes, letting the water run as hot as I could stand it, trying to wash away the feeling that I was fundamentally dirty, somehow contaminated by failure. When I finally emerged, the mirror was fogged over completely, and I was grateful not to see my reflection again. I put on the same clothes I've been wearing for 2 days, khakis and a button-down shirt that was now wrinkled beyond recognition. I hadn't packed anything, hadn't grabbed a toothbrush or a change of clothes or anything practical because I hadn't been thinking at all. Had just been operating on pure instinct. Leave, escape, disappear. But I couldn't disappear forever. Eventually, I'd need clean clothes. Eventually, I'd need to eat something other than the granola bar I'd found in my glove compartment and consumed at some point during day 1, though I couldn't remember actually eating it. Eventually, I'd need to figure out what came next. I finally picked up my phone. 23 missed calls, 47 text messages, 12 voicemails. My hands shook as I scrolled through the notifications, and I noticed something strange. None of them were from Sarah, Marcus, or Lily. Not one. They'd meant it then. No contact. I was excommunicated, erased. Most of the calls were from my brother Tom, A few from old college friends who'd apparently heard something through the grapevine. Several from numbers I didn't recognize, probably reporters or divorce lawyers or vultures of various species sensing blood in the water. I deleted them all without listening. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I drove to the public library. It was a beautiful building, all glass and modern architecture, built 5 years ago with money from some tech billionaire who'd grown up in our town and wanted to give back. I'd driven past it 1,000 times, but never actually gone inside. Why would I? I had a home office, a laptop, internet access. The library was for people who didn't have those things. People like me now, apparently. Inside it was quiet in a different way than the hotel room. Not empty quiet, but full quiet. The kind of silence that comes from dozens of people all focusing on their own private worlds. Students at tables with textbooks spread out like maps of foreign countries. Elderly people reading newspapers. A mother in the children's section reading a picture book to a toddler in a voice so gentle it made my chest ache. I found an empty computer terminal in the back corner and sat down. The chair was hard plastic, uncomfortable by design. The keyboard was sticky. Someone had scratched "Nick was here" into the desk surface with what must have been considerable effort. I logged into my email for the first time in 3 days. The inbox exploded with messages. 180 unread emails, most of them work-related, now utterly irrelevant. But there near the top was one from Gary Henderson with the subject line, "Severance package" and "exit terms." I clicked it open, my heart hammering. The email was formal and brief. I was being offered 3 months' salary as severance, contingent on my signing a separation agreement that included a non-disparagement clause and a waiver of my right to sue for wrongful termination. My health insurance would continue for 60 days. I had 1 week to respond. 3 months' salary. It sounded like a lot until I did the math. About $30,000 before taxes. Barely enough to rent a small apartment and buy groceries for half a year, let alone pay Marcus's $148,000 college bill. Not that I was going to pay that bill. Not now. Maybe not ever. The thought came with a small surge of something that might have been anger if it weren't so exhausted. They wanted to disown me and take my money, make me disappear and fund their futures. Who did they think I was? More importantly, who did I think I was? I spent the next 4 hours in that library and something strange happened. Something I hadn't expected. I started to wake up. Not physically. I was still exhausted, still hollowed out, still looked like death warmed over. But mentally, something began to shift. The fog that had been smothering my brain since the moment Sarah ripped our wedding photo started to lift. Just a little. Just enough for me to think clearly for the first time in days. I opened a new browser window and started searching. First divorce law in our state community property asset division, alimony, child support, though our children were adults now, so that didn't apply. I read through page after page of legal text, taking notes on a piece of paper I'd grabbed from the printer station. Second, wrongful termination. What constituted it? What were my rights? Could Gary actually fire me like that in front of 100 people with no warning, no documentation of poor performance? The more I read, the more questions I had. Third, and this one surprised me, Sarah's business. I typed "Elegant Interiors" by Sarah Morrison into Google and started clicking through the results. Her website was sleek and professional, full of photos of beautiful rooms and glowing testimonials from satisfied clients. There was a blog where she posted design tips and project highlights, an Instagram account with 47,000 followers, a LinkedIn profile that described her as award-winning interior designer serving high-end residential and commercial clients throughout the tri-state area. Award-winning. I hadn't known that. Hadn't even known she'd been nominated for any awards. What else didn't I know? I clicked through to her business registration on the state's website. Elegant Interiors LLC had been registered 6 years ago, not 5 like I'd thought. Sarah was listed as the sole owner and operator. The business address was a commercial suite in downtown, not her home office like I'd assumed. How much did it cost to rent commercial space downtown? How much was her business actually making? I'd signed our joint tax returns every year without really looking at them. Sarah had always handled that she was better with numbers than I was, she'd said, which was ironic since I was literally an accountant. But I'd believed her, trusted her, let her take care of it because I was busy with work and it was easier not to think about it. What had I signed? What had I agreed to without reading? The questions were piling up now, multiplying like bacteria in a petri dish. And underneath them all was a bigger question, a more fundamental one. Had I been set up? The thought was paranoid, ridiculous, the kind of thing a crazy person would think, but I couldn't shake it. The timing of everything. Sarah's business taking off right around the time Marcus started college. The party scheduled exactly when I'd be most vulnerable, most likely to just accept whatever they told me. Gary being there to fire me on the spot, as if it had all been coordinated. 6 months. Lily had said they'd been planning this for 6 months. What had they been planning exactly? By the time the library announced it was closing 15 minutes to shut down, please save your work and log off, I had filled 4 pages with notes and questions. My hand ached from writing. My eyes burned from staring at the computer screen. But I felt something I hadn't felt in days, something I barely recognized anymore. Purpose. I drove back to the hotel as dusk settled over the town, painting everything in shades of purple and gold. The temperature had dropped and I could see my breath in the air when I got out of the car. Winter was coming. I'd need to figure out where I was going to live, what I was going to do for money, how I was going to survive. But first, I needed to understand what had actually happened to me. In the hotel room, I spread my notes across the bed and stared at them. Facts, questions, timelines. It looked like the beginning of an investigation, which is exactly what it was. I'd spent 25 years working in accounting, helping businesses and individuals understand their financial situations, finding patterns in numbers, tracking money as it moved through complex systems. I was good at it, or at least I had been, until Gary Henderson decided I wasn't anymore. Maybe it was time to use those skills for myself. I picked up my phone and scrolled through the contacts until I found the name I was looking for. David Chen. We'd gone to college together, lost touch for years, then reconnected at a conference 5 years ago. He was a private investigator now, specialized in financial investigations, worked mostly with divorce lawyers and fraud cases. I hadn't called him in 3 years. Wasn't even sure he'd remember me, but I called anyway. He picked up on the third ring. James Morrison. Now that's a name I haven't seen in a while. How the hell are you? I opened my mouth to say fine or good or any of the automatic responses that usually spilled out. But what came out instead was the truth. I need help. There was a pause, then, talk to me. So I did. I told him everything. The party, the divorce, the disownment, the firing, Marcus's invoice, Lily taking my car, Sarah's 6 months of planning, the pieces that didn't quite fit together, the questions that kept multiplying. David listened without interrupting, and when I finally finished, he was quiet for a long moment. James, he said finally, how much do you actually know about your wife's finances? I file taxes jointly. I know roughly what she makes. Roughly, he repeated. Have you ever looked at her actual business accounts, bank statements, client contracts? No, she handles all that. Another pause. Okay, here's what I'm thinking. Something about this smells wrong. The public humiliation, the coordinated timing, your boss being there. That's not just a divorce, that's a statement. And in my experience, when someone makes that big a statement, there's usually something they're trying to hide underneath it. Like what? That's what we're going to find out. But James, I need to be straight with you. This kind of investigation costs money. My retainer is $5,000, and depending on what we find, it could go higher. Can you afford that? I thought about my checking account, about the severance package I hadn't signed yet, about the fact that I was probably going to need every penny just to survive the next few months. Yes, I said. I can afford it. It might have been a lie, but it felt like the truth. Good, David said. I'll send you an intake form. Fill it out with everything you can remember. Account numbers, property titles, business names, all of it. The more detail, the better. And James. Yeah? Don't talk to your wife. Don't talk to your kids. Don't post anything on social media. Don't tell anyone what you're doing. As far as they're concerned, you're just lying down and taking it. Can you do that? I thought about Sarah's face as she ripped our wedding photo, Marcus's cold eyes as he handed me that invoice, Lily's laugh when she took my car keys. Yes, I said. I can do that. We hung up and I sat there in the dim hotel room feeling something shift in my chest. Not hope exactly, not yet, but something close to it, something that felt like the beginning of a plan. On the fourth day, my phone started ringing. The first call came at 6:47 a.m. Sarah, her name flashing on the screen like an accusation. I stared at it until it went to voicemail. Then another call 10 minutes later. Then another. By noon, I had 17 missed calls, all from Sarah. Marcus called at 2 p.m., Lily at 3:15 p.m., Sarah again at 4 p.m., 5 p.m., 6 p.m. I didn't answer any of them because I'd learned something important in those 4 days of silence. When you stop reacting, when you stop being the person they expect you to be, people get nervous, they get sloppy, they make mistakes, and I was counting on it. There's a particular kind of power that comes from being underestimated, from watching people who thought they had you figured out suddenly realize they were wrong. I'd never felt that power before, had never even considered it as something worth pursuing, but I was beginning to understand its value. The calls kept coming. Day 5, 23 calls. Day 6, 31. By day 7, Sarah had left 14 voicemails, and I'd listened to exactly none of them. I could see the durations, though the first few were brief, 30 seconds or less. By the end of day 6, she was leaving messages that ran over 3 minutes. Desperation has a timestamp, apparently. Marcus sent texts instead of calling, short, clipped messages that started off demanding and gradually shifted into something else. Dad, you need to call Mom back. This is serious. We need to talk about the payment plan for my tuition. Dad, come on, stop being childish. And then on day 7, are you okay? That last one almost broke me. Almost made me respond because despite everything, despite the invoice and the coldness and the sperm donor comment, he was still my son. Some part of me that refused to die still hoped that Marcus was just confused, just angry, just caught up in whatever poison Sarah had been feeding him for the past 6 months. But I didn't respond. Couldn't, because David had been clear. Silence was my weapon now, and I needed to use it. I'd moved out of the hotel on day 5. $300 a night was sustainable for a few days, but not for the long term, and I needed to conserve resources. I found a furnished studio apartment on the outskirts of town, the kind of place that rented by the week, no questions asked, no credit check required. It was small and depressing, with a Murphy bed that didn't quite fold back into the wall and a kitchenette that consisted of a mini fridge, a hot plate, and a microwave that sparked when you used it. But it was mine. Or at least it was nobody else's. I'd filled out David's intake form the same night I called him, sitting in that hotel room with my notes spread across the bed, trying to remember details I'd never paid attention to in the first place. When did Sarah open her business checking account? What bank did she use? Did she have any business partners or investors I didn't know about? I'd felt stupid filling it out, stupid and negligent. Like a man who'd been asleep at the wheel of his own life. What kind of husband didn't know these things? What kind of father let his family plan his destruction for 6 months without noticing a single warning sign? But David had been patient when I'd sent it back with more blanks than answers. Don't worry, He'd said over the phone the next day. This is normal. Most people don't realize how little they know about their spouse's finances until something like this happens. We'll figure it out. Now, a week after the party, I was sitting in my depressing studio apartment with a yellow legal pad and a laptop I'd bought from a pawn shop for $200, teaching myself to be an investigator in my own life. The first thing David had told me to do was reconstruct a timeline, not just of the past 6 months, the period Sarah had apparently been planning this, but of the past 5 years, going back to when she'd started her business. Financial deception doesn't happen overnight, he'd explained. There's always a pattern, always a progression. We need to find where it started. So I started writing dates, events, changes in behavior or routine that I could remember. It was harder than I expected trying to recall specific moments from years ago, trying to separate what actually happened from what I'd told myself was happening. 2020. Sarah announces she wants to start an interior design business. I'm supportive. We discuss using our savings for initial investment. I think we agreed on $15,000. Did we? I can't remember signing anything. 2020. Sarah rents office space downtown. I'm surprised. Thought she'd work from home. She says clients expect professionalism. Makes sense at the time. 2020 first big project. Sarah is excited. Working late hours. I'm working late. Too busy. Season. We barely see each other. Kids are in high school, mostly self-sufficient. 2021. Sarah hires an assistant. Business must be doing well. I don't ask for details. Why didn't I ask for details? 2021. We filed joint taxes. Sarah's business shows a modest profit to $42,000 for the year. Seems reasonable for a startup. I sign without reading thoroughly. I'm an accountant, and I don't read my own tax return. The pattern was emerging, but I couldn't see it clearly yet. Just hints, suggestions, the shape of something hidden beneath the surface like a submarine in dark water. I kept writing. 2021, August. Marcus starts college. Sarah insists on the expensive state school instead of community college first. He deserves it. She says we can afford it. Can we? I don't argue. Never argue about the kids. 2022. Sarah takes a business trip to Chicago, gone for 5 days. Returns with photos of hotels and restaurants. Says she met with a potential high-end client. Did she? No way to verify. 2022. Lily graduates high school, wants a gap year. Sarah supports it. I'm hesitant, but outvoted. She needs time to find herself. Sarah says, I noticed they've started talking about me in the third person. Dad wouldn't understand. When did that start? 2023, April. Another tax return. Sarah's business income has jumped significantly. $127,000. I'm impressed. Proud, even. She's building something. I mentioned maybe I could help with the bookkeeping, save her money on an accountant. She says she has it handled. I don't push. 2024. Sarah seems distant, stressed. I assume it's business pressure. I ask if she wants to talk about it. She says I wouldn't understand. There's that phrase again. 2024. The planning must have started around here. What changed? What triggered it? I stared at that last line for a long time. What had triggered it? There had to be something, a specific event or decision or moment when Sarah had decided I wasn't worth keeping around anymore. When she'd decided that public humiliation was the appropriate way to end a 23-year marriage, unless the thought came slowly, reluctantly, like a wild animal approaching a trap. Unless this wasn't about me at all. Unless I was just collateral damage in something bigger. My phone rang again. Sarah. I let it go to voicemail and went back to my timeline. If you've ever tried to reconstruct your own life from memory, you'll know how unreliable the human brain can be. We remember what we want to remember. Fill in the gaps with assumptions. Smooth over the rough patches until everything seems inevitable in retrospect. But if you push through that, if you force yourself to question every assumption, sometimes you find things you weren't supposed to see. I found mine on day 8. I was sitting in the studio apartment. I'd started thinking of it as the bunker, which made me feel both pathetic and slightly heroic, going through old emails I'd backed up to a personal account years ago. Most of them were work-related garbage, the kind of corporate correspondence that seems urgent at the time and meaningless 5 minutes later. But buried in a folder from 2021, I found an email from Sarah. The subject line was, "Quick question about taxes." I clicked it open. "Hey, I need to make a decision on something for the business and wanted your input. The accountant is saying I should structure things as an S-corp instead of an LLC for tax purposes. Something about pass-through income and self-employment tax. Does that make sense to you? Would save about $8,000 a year, apparently. Let me know what you think. Love you." I'd responded, "Whatever you think is best. You're the one running the business. Love you too." I stared at that exchange for a full minute, feeling something cold settle in my stomach. She'd asked my opinion. I deferred to her. And then what? She'd structured her business in a way that I'd technically approved, but didn't actually understand. I opened a new browser tab and started researching S corporations, tax implications, income distribution, shareholder agreements. The more I read, the more questions I had. In an S-corp, profits and losses pass through to the shareholder's personal tax returns. But Sarah was the sole shareholder of her business. At least, I thought she was. Which meant all the business income should have been reported on her joint return, which it had been, which seemed fine, except an S-corp could also pay reasonable compensation to its owner-employees separate from profit distributions. And that compensation could be structured in ways that were perfectly legal, but not immediately obvious on a joint tax return. Was Sarah paying herself a salary separate from the business profits? If so, how much? And where was that money going? I needed to see our actual tax returns. Not just the summary page I'd signed, but the full documents with all the schedules and attachments. I'd filed them away somewhere, probably in the filing cabinet in the home office, which was technically my office, but which Sarah had slowly taken over in the past few years. The office I no longer had access to, in the house I'd been ordered not to return to. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Tom's number. My brother had been surprisingly quiet since the party. No calls, no texts, nothing. Either he didn't know what to say or he was taking Sarah's side by default. Family politics are complicated that way. But I needed something from that house, and Tom was the only person I could think of who might help me get it. He answered on the second ring. "James, Jesus, I've been worried about you." "I'm fine," I said, which was approximately 30% true. "You're not fine. Nobody who goes through what you went through is fine. Where are you staying? Doesn't matter. Tom, I need a favor." There was a pause. "What kind of favor?" "I need some documents from the house. Financial records, tax returns. They should be in the filing cabinet in my office." "James, I don't think Sarah's going to let you back in the house. She's pretty clear about that. I'm not asking to go back. I'm asking if you can go get them for me." Another pause. Longer this time. "You want me to break into your house?" "It's my house too, legally. At least until the divorce is finalized." "And you're not breaking in. You're retrieving my personal property. Sarah's not going to see it that way. Does Sarah know you and I are talking right now?" "No." "Then she doesn't need to know about this either." I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line, weighing his options. Tom had always been the careful one, the one who thought things through, who avoided conflict whenever possible. But he was also my brother, and some part of him must have known that something about this whole situation was wrong. "What exactly do you need?" he asked finally. "Copies of our joint tax returns for the past 5 years should be in the cabinet, filed by year. There might also be some documents related to Sarah's business and corporation papers. Partnership agreements, anything like that. I just need copies. Photos on your phone would be fine. Partnership agreements. I thought Sarah's business was just her. So did I. That's why I need to see the documents. Tom was quiet for a moment. James, what's going on?
And don't tell me you're fine, because I know you're not.
What are you looking for? It was a fair question, and maybe if I'd been a different person, a more open person, I would have told him everything about David, about the investigation, about the fact that I was starting to suspect my wife had been running some kind of financial scheme that I'd been too blind or too stupid to notice. But I wasn't that person. Not yet. So I just said, I need to understand what happened, why it happened, and I can't do that without information. Okay. Tom said, okay, I'll do it. But James, you need to talk to someone, a therapist or a lawyer or someone. You can't just investigate your way out of this. Maybe not, I said, but I have to try. We hung up and I sat there in the bunker feeling something that might have been gratitude or might have been shame. Probably both. Tom came through 2 days later. He showed up at my apartment, and I texted him the address at 9 o'clock in the morning with a manila envelope thick with documents. He looked uncomfortable standing in my doorway, like he wasn't sure whether to come in or hand over the envelope and run. Sarah went to her office for a few hours yesterday. He explained I told her I needed to borrow some tools from the garage. Went in through the side door, got what you needed, got out. She didn't see me. Thank you, I said, taking the envelope.
Seriously, I know this was... Don't.
He cut me off. Just be careful, okay? Whatever you're looking for, whatever you find, just be careful. Sarah's not the person we thought she was. I'm starting to realize that he left before I could ask what he meant by that. I spread the documents across my small table. 5 years of tax returns, complete with all schedules and attachments. Sarah's business formation documents, bank routing information from when we'd set up automatic tax payments, a partnership agreement I'd never seen before. Wait, a partnership agreement? I picked it up, hands shaking slightly. It was dated June 2022, almost 3 years ago. An agreement between Elegant Interiors LLC and something called Renaissance Investment Holdings LLC. The agreement outlined a business arrangement where Renaissance would provide capital investment and consulting services in exchange for 25% of Elegant Interiors' annual net profits. 25% for 3 years of profits that should have been reported on our joint tax return. But I'd never heard of Renaissance Investment Holdings, had never approved this agreement, had never signed anything related to it. Who owned Renaissance Investment Holdings? I grabbed my laptop and started searching business registration databases, Secretary of State records, LinkedIn, Google. It took me 45 minutes to find it. Renaissance Investment Holdings LLC was registered in Delaware, a common tax haven state. The registered agent was a corporate service company, which meant the actual owners were hidden behind a legal wall. But Delaware law required annual reports, and those reports were public record if you knew where to look. I found the report from 2023, and there, listed as the sole member and managing director of Renaissance Investment Holdings, was a name I recognized. Marcus Morrison, my son. I sat back in my chair, the room spinning slightly. Marcus, my 21-year-old son who was supposedly struggling to pay for college, who'd handed me an invoice for $148,000 and told me it was my last chance to be useful. Marcus owned a company that was taking 25% of Sarah's business profits, had owned it since 2022 when he was 19 years old. How is that possible? How did a college sophomore form an investment company? Where did he get the capital to invest? And more importantly, had he actually invested anything? Or was this just a shell company designed to funnel money away from our joint marital assets? The calls from Sarah suddenly made sense. The desperate voicemails, the texts from Marcus asking if I was okay. They weren't worried about me. They were worried about what I might find. I picked up my phone and called David. "I found something," I said when he answered. "Tell me." So I did. The partnership agreement. Renaissance Investment Holdings, Marcus's name on the registration. The 25% of profits that should have been community property but had somehow been siphoned off to my son's company instead. David was quiet for a long moment. "James, do you understand what this means?" "I think so, but I want to hear you say it." "It means your wife has been systematically moving marital assets into your son's name for at least 3 years. It means the business income reported on your joint tax returns was artificially low because a quarter of it was being paid out to a company you had no knowledge of. It means you've been signing tax returns that were at minimum misleading and at maximum fraudulent." My hands were shaking. "How much money are we talking about?" "I'd need to see her actual business accounts to know for sure, but based on the income figures you gave me, conservatively, probably $200,000 to $300,000 over 3 years, maybe more. $200,000 to $300,000. Enough to pay for Marcus's college twice over. Enough to buy a car for Lily. Enough to fund a very comfortable post-divorce life for Sarah." "What do I do?" I asked. "First, don't tell anyone what you found. Not your brother, not your friends, not anyone. Second, send me copies of everything. Third, let me dig deeper. If they've been this clever about hiding money, there might be more we haven't found yet." And then, David said, his voice carrying something that might have been satisfaction. "We document everything, build an airtight case, and when they think you've given up, when they think they've won, we show them exactly how wrong they were." I hung up and sat there in the bunker, surrounded by papers that proved my family had been stealing from me. My wife, my son, probably my daughter too, in ways I hadn't discovered yet. I should have been angry, should have been rage-filled and vengeful and ready to burn everything down. But all I felt was sad. Sad and tired and strangely calm because I finally understood what had happened. Finally saw the pattern, and knowledge I was learning was its own kind of power. My phone rang. Sarah again. I looked at it for a long moment, then did something I hadn't done in 10 days. I answered. "Hello, Sarah." My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Calm, even like I was answering a call from a telemarketer rather than the woman who'd orchestrated my public destruction. There was a pause on the other end of the line. A moment of shocked silence, as if she'd been calling for so long without response that actually hearing my voice had caught her off guard. "James." She said my name like an accusation, like I was the one who'd done something wrong. Finally. "Do you have any idea how many times I've tried to reach you?" 73. I said 73 calls over 10 days. I've been counting. Another pause. I could hear her breathing, could imagine her standing wherever she was. Probably her downtown office, probably surrounded by fabric swatches and paint samples and all the trappings of the successful business she'd built while systematically robbing me. "We need to talk," she said finally. "No," I replied. "You need to talk. I'm just listening." "Don't be childish, James. This is serious." Childish. That's what Marcus had called me in his text. They'd coordinated their language, rehearsed their lines. I wondered if they'd had meetings about this, strategy sessions where they planned exactly what to say to manipulate me into compliance. "I'm being the opposite of childish," I said. "I'm being very, very adult." "So talk. Tell me what's so urgent that you've called me 73 times. I heard her take a breath, composing herself. When she spoke again, her voice had shifted into what I thought of as her client mode. Professional, controlled, artificially warm. The voice she used when she wanted something. "The divorce papers," she said. "You need to sign them. My lawyer says you received them on the second day and there's a response deadline. We're running out of time." Running out of time? For what? For making this easy. For keeping things civil, James, I know you're hurt.
I know the party was dramatic, but this is happening whether you cooperate or not. We can do this the easy way or the hard way. The easy way or the hard way. A threat disguised as an option. If you've ever been in a conversation where every word feels like a chess move, where you're trying to learn as much as you reveal, you'll understand why I chose my next words so carefully. What happens if I don't sign? I asked. Then my lawyer files a contested divorce, which means court appearances, depositions, months or years of legal battles. It means airing all our private business in public. It means spending money on lawyers instead of moving on with our lives. Is that really what you want? I don't know what I want, I said honestly. A week and a half ago, I wanted my marriage. I wanted my family. I wanted to believe that the people I'd spent 23 years loving actually loved me back, but we don't always get what we want, do we? Sarah, don't be dramatic. I'm not being dramatic. I'm being honest. For possibly the first time in years. I'm being completely honest. You don't like it because you're not used to it. You're used to me just nodding and agreeing and signing whatever you put in front of me without reading it. I heard her sharp intake of breath. A hit. A palpable hit. What's that supposed to mean? She asked, her voice tight. It means I've had a lot of time to think over the past 10 days about our marriage, about your business, about how involved I was in the decisions that shaped our family's financial future. I paused, letting the weight of those words settle, or rather how uninvolved I was. You were always working, she said, defensive now. You were always at the office or with clients or traveling for the firm. You didn't have time to be involved. That's true, I agreed. I was working to support our family, working to make sure we had health insurance and retirement savings and college funds, working while you build your business with money I helped provide. Isn't that how partnerships are supposed to work? Where the partnerships are supposed to work. Where the partnerships are supposed to work. This isn't about partnerships, James. This is about the fact that our marriage is over, that it's been over for years. We were just both too comfortable or too cowardly to admit it. Were we? Or was I too comfortable and you were too busy planning? Planning what? Lily said you'd been planning the party for 6 months. That's a long time to coordinate something like that. The venue, the guest list, getting Gary to show up and fire me in front of everyone. That takes organization. For thought. It takes treating the end of a marriage like a business transaction. Sarah was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice had lost some of its professional polish. You think I wanted it to be that way? You think I enjoyed it? I think you orchestrated it exactly the way you wanted it. Nothing about that night was spontaneous or emotional or messy. It was calculated, precise, every detail planned to maximize impact. I've been wondering why. Why not just sit me down at home and tell me you wanted a divorce? Why the spectacle? Because I knew you'd talk me out of it, she said, and for the first time she sounded almost human, almost like the woman I'd married. I knew you'd be reasonable and calm, and you'd ask what we could do to fix things. And I'd start to doubt myself. I'd start to think maybe we could work it out, maybe counseling, maybe trying harder. And I didn't want to be talked out of it, James. I wanted it to be final, irreversible. There was something almost like honesty in her voice, and it made what I had to do next a little bit harder. So you humiliated me in front of 100 people to make sure I'd be too destroyed to fight back, I said quietly. I humiliated you because you humiliated me for years. Coming home late, missing important moments, treating our family like an obligation instead of a joy. You were there, but you weren't there. And I was tired of pretending it didn't hurt. And Marcus and Lily, they felt the same way. They're adults. They made their own decisions about their relationship with you. Their own decisions, I repeated.
Like Marcus's decision to hand me a bill for $148,000. He needs help with school. You're his father. It's not unreasonable for him to ask. Ask, maybe. Demand, while downing me. That's different. He's angry, James. They both are. You weren't there for them growing up, and now they're dealing with the consequences of having a father who checked out emotionally years ago. This was the narrative they'd settled on. I realized the story they'd tell themselves and anyone who asked. James was a bad father, a bad husband, emotionally absent, and they'd simply had enough. It was a good story, simple, clean, believable, especially because there were elements of truth in it. I had worked long hours. I had missed recital and games and parent-teacher conferences. I had been tired and distracted and probably not as present as I should have been. But that didn't explain Renaissance Investment Holding. That didn't explain why my son owned a company that was siphoning off a quarter of my wife's business profits. Sarah, I said, can I ask you something? What? Are you happy now? I mean, now that you've blown up our life and gotten rid of me, are you actually happy? The question seemed to surprise her. I heard her moving around, maybe walking to a window or sitting down. When she spoke, her voice was softer. I don't know yet, she said. Ask me in 6 months. Fair enough, I said. One more question, James. Ever. Does Marcus know about Renaissance Investment Holdings? The silence that followed was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. It stretched for 5 seconds, then 10, then 15. I counted them in my head while my heart hammered in my chest. I'd shown my hand, revealed that I knew something I wasn't supposed to know. It was a calculated risk, but necessary because I needed to see how she'd react. I don't know what you're talking about, she said finally, but her voice had changed. The professional polish was gone. She sounded careful now. Wary, don't you? That's interesting because I found a partnership agreement between your business and a company called Renaissance Investment Holdings, dated June 2012. The company that's been receiving 25% of your profits for almost 3 years. The company that's owned by our son. How did you... She caught herself, but it was too late. The question had already confirmed everything. How did I find it? Does that matter? What matters is that it exists, that Marcus owns a company I've never heard of, that a quarter of the income from your business income that should be marital property has been going somewhere else entirely, somewhere I wasn't supposed to know about. You don't understand, Sarah said, and now she sounded desperate. It's not what it looks like. Then explain it to me. Make me understand. I can't. Not over the phone. James, if you found those documents, then you need to know there's context. There's a reason. A reason you've been hiding money from me? A reason you set up a shell company in our son's name to funnel marital assets away before filing for divorce? I'd love to hear that reason, Sarah. I really would. It's not like that, she insisted. Marcus needed help. He had expenses, student loans. He was struggling. Struggling how? I've been paying his tuition. We set up a college fund when he was born. There should have been more than enough. Silence again. And in that silence, I understood there had never been a college fund. Or if there had been, it was gone now, spent or hidden or transferred into one of Sarah's many carefully constructed financial vehicles. And Marcus's $148,000 invoice wasn't about paying for college. It was about getting me to replace money they'd already taken. It was elegant, really cruel and illegal and morally bankrupt, but elegant. You spent his college fund, I said. It wasn't a question. I used it to invest in the business, Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. It was supposed to be temporary. I was going to pay it back. The business was growing and I needed capital, and the returns would have been... The returns, I interrupted, went to Renaissance Investment Holdings. 25% of them. Anyway, tell me, Sarah, Did you actually invest anything through Marcus's company, or was it just a legal mechanism to hide income from me?
James, please. You have to understand.
I don't have to understand anything. What I have to do is decide what to do with this information, whether to go to a judge with evidence of financial fraud, whether to report you to the IRS for filing false joint tax returns, whether to tell Marcus that his mother stole his college fund and then convinced him to help her steal from me too. Don't. The word came out sharp, almost panicked. Don't do any of that, James. We can work this out. We can sit down and talk and find a solution that works for everyone. Like the solution you came up with on my birthday, where you humiliated me and fired me and took everything from me in front of 100 witnesses. That kind of solution.
I made mistakes, she said. I know I did. The party was wrong. The way I handled everything was wrong, but I can fix this. We can fix this.
No, I said quietly. We can't, because we doesn't exist anymore, Sarah. You made sure of that.
What do you want?
She asked. And now I could hear tears in her voice, real ones, maybe.
What do you want from me, James? Money? The house? Alimony? Tell me what it will take to make this go away.
What did I want? The question echoed in my mind like a bell. What did I want? Revenge? Justice? Some kind of twisted satisfaction from watching her squirm? No, none of those things, really. What I wanted was simpler and more complicated at the same time. I wanted to understand why. Why she'd done this. Why she'd involved our children. Why she'd spent years planning my destruction instead of just asking for a divorce like a normal person. I wanted to know if she'd ever actually loved me, or if I'd just been a means to an end from the very beginning. I wanted to stop feeling like a fool, but I couldn't say any of that. Couldn't let her hear the hurt in my voice. Couldn't give her the satisfaction of knowing how deeply she'd cut me. So instead I said, I want you to stop calling me. Stop having Marcus and Lily call me. Leave me alone while I figure out what comes next and the divorce papers. I'll respond when I'm ready. Through my lawyer. You don't have a lawyer. I will by tomorrow. Another pause.
James, please. Can we just meet face to face? No lawyers, no drama. Just the two of us talking like adults.
We tried that for 23 years. Sarah, I don't think one more conversation is going to make a difference. At least think about it, please. For what we used to mean to each other. If nothing else, for what we used to mean to each other. The phrase hung in the air between us, heavy with history and loss, and all the ways we'd failed each other over the years. I'll think about it. I lied. Goodbye, Sarah. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking. My whole body was shaking. Adrenaline coursing through my system like electricity. I'd done it. I'd confronted her. I'd revealed enough to make her panic without showing her everything I knew. And most importantly, I'd stayed calm, stayed in control. I felt powerful in a way I'd never felt before. Like I'd been walking around half asleep my entire adult life and had just now opened my eyes. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus this time. Mom says you know about Renaissance. We need to talk. When can you meet? I stared at the message for a long moment. So they were coordinating, probably in a panic now, trying to figure out what I knew and what I might do with the information, trying to get ahead of whatever damage I might cause. Let them panic. I opened my laptop and started drafting an email to David Chen, attaching photos of all the documents Tom had retrieved for me, the tax returns, the partnership agreement, the business registration for Renaissance Investment Holdings, everything. In the email, I wrote, Sarah knows I found the partnership agreement. She's scared. They're all scared. What's our next move? I hit send and sat back in my chair, feeling exhausted and exhilarated at the same time. This was real now. Not just hurt feelings and emotional wounds, but actual evidence of wrongdoing, Financial fraud, tax evasion possibly. Definitely grounds for a very different kind of divorce than the one Sarah had planned. My phone rang again.
Lily. This time I let it go to voicemail, then Marcus. Voicemail, then Sarah again. Voicemail. The desperation was palpable. Even in silence, even in unanswered calls and ignored texts, they were losing control of the narrative, and they knew it. I thought about Marcus's text, his request to meet. The way he'd phrased it, not as a question, but as a statement of necessity. We need to talk. Not, I want to talk, or can we please talk? Need. The language of compulsion. They thought they could still manage me, still manipulate me into doing what they wanted. After everything they'd done, after the public humiliation and the theft and the betrayal, they still thought I was the same James who would just nod and agree and sign whatever they put in front of me. But I wasn't that James anymore. That James had died on his 50th birthday in a ballroom full of people who'd come to watch him be destroyed. This James, the one sitting in a depressing studio apartment with documents spread across the table like evidence at a crime scene. This James was someone different, someone harder, someone smarter. Someone who'd learned finally that silence could be a weapon, and knowledge could be armor, and patience could be the difference between losing everything and reclaiming something worth having. My laptop dinged with a response from David. I opened it. Good work. Don't meet with any of them alone. Don't make any promises. I'm bringing in a forensic accountant tomorrow to look at everything. If what you found is the tip of the iceberg, we need to know what's underneath. Sit tight. Let them sweat. This is when people make mistakes. I closed the laptop and looked around my small apartment. The Murphy bed, the sparking microwave, the single window that looked out onto a parking lot. This was my life now, at least temporarily. But it didn't feel like defeat anymore. It felt like a command center. A place where I could think clearly, plan carefully, and prepare for whatever came next. My phone buzzed again, a voicemail notification. Against my better judgment, I opened it and pressed play. It was Sarah's voice, ragged and desperate. James, please. Please call me back. I know you're angry. I know I hurt you. But we can fix this. We can make this right. I just need you to trust me one more time. Just one more time. Please trust her one more time. I almost laughed because that's what this had all been built on, wasn't it? Trust. My trust that Sarah was handling our finances responsibly. My trust that Marcus needed $148,000 for college. My trust that my family loved me enough not to destroy me for sport. Trust was the weapon they'd used against me. The one thing I'd given freely, stupidly, year after year after year. And now she wanted me to give it again. No. I deleted the voicemail and turned off my phone. Tomorrow I would call a divorce lawyer, a real one, not whatever hack Sarah's people were using. Tomorrow I would start building my case, documenting everything, preparing for the battle I knew was coming. But tonight, I just sat in the dark and let myself feel something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope. There's a certain kind of clarity that comes from sitting across a desk from someone who deals in facts rather than feelings. Someone who looks at numbers the way a surgeon looks at an X-ray, objectively, clinically, searching for the thing that doesn't belong. Her name was Patricia Vance, and she was the forensic accountant David had brought in. She was in her late 50s with gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and reading glasses that hung from a chain around her neck. She wore a navy pantsuit that looked like it had been purchased sometime in the early 2000s and never replaced. And she carried a leather briefcase that was so worn the corners had gone soft. She looked, in other words, exactly like someone who'd spent 30 years following money trails and didn't care much about appearances. We met in David's office, a modest space in a strip mall between a nail salon and a tax preparation service.
The walls were covered with framed licenses and certifications, and there was a plant in the corner that looked like it was staging a very slow suicide. But the coffee was good, and David had remembered that I took it black, which felt like a small kindness in a world that had been notably short on kindness lately. Patricia spread the documents I'd provided across David's conference table with the precision of someone dealing cards: tax returns, bank statements, the partnership agreement, business registration forms, emails I dug up from old backups. She studied each one for a moment, making notes in a leather notebook with a fountain pen that looked older than I was. "Walk me through your marriage," she said without looking up. "Financially speaking, when did you combine accounts? Who handled what? Were there ever separate finances?" I thought back to the beginning, to Sarah and me in our first apartment. Both of us in our 20s, both working entry-level jobs and trying to figure out how to be adults. "We combined everything when we got married," I said. "Joint checking account, joint savings. I handled the bills in the early years because I was better with spreadsheets. She managed the household budget, groceries, utilities, that kind of thing. It worked." "When did it stop working?" Patricia asked. I don't know if it ever stopped working exactly. It just evolved. When Sarah started her business 5 years ago, she opened separate business accounts. That made sense. You want to keep business and personal finances separate for tax purposes. I didn't question it. Did you have access to those business accounts? No, I wasn't authorized on them. She said it was cleaner that way, and I agreed. I was authorized on our personal accounts. She was authorized on the business accounts, and we transfer money between them as needed. Patricia made a note. How often did you look at the personal account statements? I felt my face flush. Not often. Maybe once a month. Sarah usually handled reconciling the accounts. I'd check the balance occasionally, make sure we weren't overdrafted, but she was more detail-oriented about tracking expenses. So she had control of both the business finances and the day-to-day personal finances. Yes. And you trusted her. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. Yes. Patricia finally looked up at me. Her expression neutral, but not unkind. Mr. Morrison, I'm going to be blunt with you. Based on what I'm seeing here, your wife has been running a fairly sophisticated asset concealment scheme. The partnership with your son's company is just the most obvious piece. There are likely others. Others, I repeated. The word felt heavy in my mouth. These things are rarely isolated, she explained. When someone goes to the trouble of setting up a shell company to funnel money away from marital assets, they usually don't stop there. It's like if you find one cockroach, you probably have an infestation. That's a comforting metaphor, I said dryly. She almost smiled. I'm not here to comfort you. I'm here to find out where your money went and help you get it back. So let me ask you something. Do you know how much your wife's business is actually worth? She reported $127,000 in income on last year's tax return. Income? Yes. But what about assets? Equipment, inventory, client contracts, intellectual property, goodwill? A successful interior design business that's been operating for 5 years could be worth significantly more than its annual income. I hadn't thought about that. Hadn't even considered that the business itself might be an asset separate from the money it generated. I have no idea, I admitted. Then that's where we start, Patricia said. She pulled out a fresh sheet of paper and started writing. I need you to authorize me to subpoena your wife's business records. Bank statements, credit card statements, client invoices, everything. David tells me you haven't signed the divorce papers yet. No. Good. Don't. Not until we know what we're dealing with. Once the divorce is filed and accepted, it becomes much harder to claim fraud. Right now, you're still married, which means you have a legal right to information about marital assets. David leaned forward. We'll file a motion for her financial discovery as part of the divorce proceedings. Force Sarah to produce all her records. If she refuses, or if the records don't match what we find independently, that's evidence of concealment. What if she's destroyed evidence? I asked. Banks keep records, Patricia said. Credit card companies keep records. The IRS keeps records. You can shred paper all you want, but you can't erase digital transactions. If money moved, we'll find it. If you've ever felt the strange mixture of hope and dread that comes from realizing your life is worse than you thought, but also that there might be a way to fix it, you'll understand what I felt in that moment. Because Patricia was essentially telling me that Sarah had been stealing from me for years, but also that there was a trail, evidence, proof, facts I could use. "How long will this take?" I asked. "Depends on how cooperative your wife is," Patricia said. "If she turns over everything voluntarily. Maybe a few weeks if we have to fight for every document. Could be months. We don't have months." David interjected. "Sarah's lawyer is pushing for a quick settlement. They'll argue that James is being obstructionist, that he's dragging things out unnecessarily. The longer we take, the worse it looks. Then we move fast," Patricia said. She started gathering documents, organizing them into neat stacks. "I'll start with what we have. Run a preliminary analysis, see if I can spot any obvious red flags beyond the Renaissance Holdings situation. Mr. Morrison, I need you to do something for me." "What?" "I need you to write down everything you can remember about any major purchases or financial decisions made in the last 5 years. Cars, home improvements, vacations, anything over $1,000. Who initiated it? Who paid for it? Where the money came from. Can you do that?" "Yes," I said, though the thought of reconstructing 5 years of financial history from memory felt overwhelming. "Good. And one more thing. Do you have any idea what your wife's lifestyle expenses are? How much she spends on herself personally?" I thought about Sarah's clothes, always designer labels now. Her car, a new Mercedes she'd bought 2 years ago, the expensive restaurants she posted about on Instagram, the weekend trips to New York and Chicago. "More than she used to," I said carefully. "She's always saying it's for the business, networking with clients, maintaining a certain image. It's hard to separate what's personal and what's professional." Patricia nodded knowingly. "That's by design. When you mix personal and business expenses, everything becomes murky. The designer handbag is for client meetings. The luxury car is for transporting samples. The spa day is for stress relief so she can work better." It all sounds reasonable until you add it up and realize she's living like she makes $500,000 a year while reporting a fraction of that. She pulled out her phone and started typing. "I'm going to need copies of her social media posts going back as far as possible. Instagram, Facebook, whatever she uses. People love to document their spending online. They just don't realize they're creating evidence." "Evidence of what?" I asked. "Lifestyle that doesn't match reported income. If she's claiming she makes $127,000 a year, but she's posting pictures of herself in Paris at a 5-star hotel wearing a $3,000 dress, drinking $200 bottles of wine, that's a discrepancy. It means money is coming from somewhere." "Renaissance Holdings?" I said. "Maybe. Or maybe there's another source we haven't found yet." The thought made my stomach turn. Another source. Another layer of deception. How deep did this go? David must have seen something in my face because he put a hand on my shoulder. "James, I know this is a lot, but finding this stuff now before the divorce is finalized is the best possible scenario. You have leverage. You have evidence. You're not the powerless victim they tried to make you into." "I don't feel very powerful," I admitted. "You will," Patricia said, and there was something almost fierce in her voice. "I've seen this pattern before, Mr. Morrison. Spouse builds a business with marital funds, starts siphoning money into hidden accounts, convinces the other spouse they're incompetent or uninvolved or just too busy to pay attention. Then, when they're ready, they pull the trigger. Dramatic exit, public humiliation, quick settlement before the victim has time to think. They count on shame and confusion to keep you from fighting back." "That's exactly what happened," I said quietly. "I know. And here's what they didn't count on. You figuring it out. Most people don't. Most people sign whatever papers are put in front of them, take their lumps, and move on with their lives. But you didn't. You started digging. And now we know there's something to find, which means we keep digging until we find all of it. She stood up, gathering her briefcase and the document she was taking with her. I'll have a preliminary report for you in 3 days. In the meantime, do what I said. Document everything you can remember. And Mr. Morrison, yes. Stop answering their calls. Stop engaging at all. Every conversation is an opportunity for them to manipulate you or gather information about what you know. Radio silence until we're ready to make our move. After Patricia left, David and I sat in his office drinking coffee that had gone lukewarm, both of us processing what we just learned. She's good, I said finally. She's the best. Worked for the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit for 15 years before going private. If there's money hidden, she'll find it. And if she finds it, what happens then? David leaned back in his chair. Then we have options. We can use it as leverage to negotiate a better settlement. We can file a motion to freeze her assets so she can't move anything else before the divorce is final. If the fraud is egregious enough, we can potentially have her held in contempt or even pursue criminal charges. Criminal charges, I repeated. The words felt surreal. We were talking about my wife, the mother of my children, the woman I'd shared a bed with for 23 years. It's an option, David said carefully. Not necessarily the right one, but an option. James, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. What do you want out of this? What's your goal? I thought about that question. What did I want? Revenge? To see Sarah suffer the way she'd made me suffer? Maybe a little, if I was being honest. Justice? To reclaim what was rightfully mine? Absolutely. But there was something else too, something harder to articulate. I wanted to understand. I wanted to know why she'd done this, what I'd missed, what signs I'd ignored. I wanted the truth, even if the truth was ugly. I want what's fair, I said finally. I want whatever I'm legally entitled to. I want her to face consequences for what she did, but more than that, I want to stop feeling like an idiot. I want to understand what actually happened so I can move forward. David nodded slowly. That's a good answer. Honest. Because, James, here's the thing. You could burn her to the ground if you wanted to. You could make her life hell, drag this out for years, turn it into a war. But wars are expensive, and they damage everyone involved, and at the end, you're still divorced and alone, just with a few more battle scars. So what do you suggest? I'm suggesting we build the strongest possible case, document everything, and then we present her with a choice. She can settle fairly, really fairly, not the garbage settlement she's trying to push through now. Or we can take this to court and expose everything. Most people, when confronted with solid evidence and real consequences, will choose to settle. And if she doesn't, David smiled, and it wasn't a particularly nice smile. Then we introduce her to Judge Martinez, who happens to hate financial fraud and has no patience for spouses who try to hide assets. We let Patricia testify about what she found. We let the numbers speak for themselves. And we watch Sarah try to explain to a judge why she set up a shell company in her son's name to funnel money away from her husband. The image was satisfying, I had to admit, but there was still one piece that bothered me. What about Marcus and Lily? I asked. They're adults, but they're still my children. If this goes to court, if it becomes public, they'll be dragged into it. Their names will be in legal documents. People will know what they did. They made their choices, David said. They stood in that ballroom and humiliated you. Marcus handed you a bill and told you to pay or disappear. Lily took your car and laughed about it. At some point, James, you have to stop protecting people who aren't protecting you. He was right. I knew he was right. But knowing something intellectually and feeling it emotionally are two very different things. I left David's office with a folder full of documents and a list of tasks to complete. Document major purchases, save Sarah's social media posts, write a timeline, prepare for a deposition. The practical steps of dismantling a marriage and, maybe if Patricia was right, exposing a fraud. I drove back to the bunker. I'd started calling it that even in my head and found a notice taped to my door. The building was being sold, and all month-to-month tenants needed to vacate within 30 days. Perfect. Just perfect. I crumpled the notice and threw it in the trash, then sat down at my small table and opened my laptop. Time to start documenting. Time to start building the case that would either save me or destroy whatever was left of my family. I started with the easy stuff, the Mercedes Sarah had bought. I remembered the day she'd brought it home, gleaming silver, leather interior, all the high-end features. She'd said she'd gotten a good deal, traded in her old car, financed the rest. But had she? Or had money from Renaissance Holdings paid for it? Money that should have been ours, not just hers. I made a note. Check financing records for Mercedes. Date of purchase, April 2023. Claimed trade-in value, $8,000. Claimed financing, $45,000. Next, the bathroom renovation. Sarah had insisted we needed to update the master bath. Said it was looking dated. Said it would increase the home's value. I'd agreed, thinking it was a reasonable investment. The contractor had quoted $35,000. But had that been the real cost? Or had Sarah inflated it, pocketed the difference? Note, master bath renovation quoted price $35,000. Actual cost, get receipts from contractor. The vacation to Turks and Caicos last year. Sarah had said it was a business trip that she was meeting with a potential client who owned a resort there, but I'd gone too, and I hadn't met any clients. We'd spent a week on the beach, eating at expensive restaurants, staying in a villa that cost $800 a night. Note, Turks and Caicos trip, January 2024. Business expense or personal? If business, should be documented. If personal, where did $7,000 plus come from? Line by line, purchase by purchase, I reconstructed our financial life, and with each line I saw the pattern more clearly. Sarah had been living well, very well, while telling me we needed to be careful with money. While suggesting I drive my old car instead of buying new, while saying we couldn't afford to help my brother when he needed a loan last year. She'd been living like she was rich, while keeping me living like we were barely scraping by. The anger came then. Not explosive or dramatic, but cold and clear and focused. This wasn't just betrayal. It was systematic exploitation. It was treating me like a mark, a resource to be drained and discarded when there was nothing left to take. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "This is Lily. Mom gave me your new number. We really need to talk. This is getting out of hand." Out of hand. As if I was the one making things difficult. As if I was the problem. I typed a response. "Tell your mother to communicate through her lawyer. Tell Marcus the same thing. You want to talk to me? Hire your own lawyer." I deleted it before sending. David and Patricia had both said the same thing. No contact, no engagement. Let them wonder what I knew, what I was planning, what I might do next. Silence was my weapon now. I went back to my list, documenting and remembering and building my case piece by piece by piece. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the parking lot in shades of orange and gold. It was beautiful in a stark kind of way. A kind of beauty that only exists in liminal spaces, in between times when one thing is ending and another hasn't quite begun. I was in between right now, between the life I'd had and the life I'd build, between being a victim and being something else entirely. I didn't know what that something else would look like yet, but I was starting to have ideas. Patricia Vance called me at 6:47 a.m. on the third day. I was awake. I'd been awake since 5, lying in the Murphy bed that refused to fold properly, staring at the water stain on the ceiling that looked like a map of somewhere I'd never been. Sleep had become a negotiation lately, something I bargained for in 90-minute increments between periods of staring into the dark and thinking about all the ways I'd been blind. "Mr. Morrison," Patricia said when I answered. "No preamble, no greeting. I need you to come to David's office now, if possible."
There was something in her voice, not quite excitement, but a kind of sharp focus that made my pulse quicken. "What did you find?" "Not over the phone." I looked at the clock. Not quite 7 in the morning. 45 minutes. "I'll have coffee ready." She hung up before I could ask any more questions. I drove through the pre-dawn darkness with my hands gripping the steering wheel too tight, my mind racing through possibilities. What had she found? More hidden accounts? Evidence of other shell companies? Something worse than Renaissance Holdings? The strip mall was mostly empty when I arrived, just a few cars scattered across the parking lot. Early morning workers at the tax preparation place, maybe someone getting their nails done before work. David's office was lit up like a beacon, and through the window I could see him and Patricia hunched over the conference table, surrounded by what looked like hundreds of pages of documents. The door was unlocked. I let myself in. They both looked up when I entered, and I saw something in their faces that made my stomach drop. Not bad news, exactly, but big news. The kind of news that changes everything. "Sit down, James," David said, gesturing to a chair. "You're going to want to sit down for this." I sat. Patricia pushed a cup of coffee across the table to me, black, still steaming, and then pulled out a thick binder that she'd tabbed with different colored sticky notes. "I've spent the last 72 hours reconstructing your wife's business finances," she began, flipping the binder open to a page dense with numbers. "I started with the bank statements you provided, cross-referenced them with the business tax returns, and then started pulling public records, business licenses, property records, court filings, anything I could find without a subpoena." She paused, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Mr. Morrison, your wife's business is significantly more successful than she's been reporting." "How much more successful?" Patricia slid a spreadsheet across the table. 2 columns of numbers labeled reported income and actual income, with a third column showing the difference. 2020 reported $42,000. Actual revenue, $156,000. 2021 reported $89,000. Actual revenue, $287,000. 2022 reported $127,000. Actual revenue, $412,000. 2023 reported $134,000. Actual revenue, $538,000. 2024 partial reported $118,000. Actual revenue, $41,000. Projected $600,000 plus annually. I stared at the numbers, trying to make them make sense. That's over $1 million in unreported income over 5 years. 1.2 million to be precise, Patricia said. And that's just what I could verify through public records and bank statements. The actual number is likely higher. But how? How did she hide that much money? We filed joint tax returns. I signed them. Wouldn't the IRS have noticed? They might have eventually, Patricia said. But your wife was clever about it. She didn't just hide the money. She laundered it through multiple channels to make it look legitimate. She flipped to another tab section. Renaissance Holdings was just one piece. I found 3 other LLCs, all registered in Delaware, all with different nominal owners. One is in Lily's name. One is registered to Sarah's sister, Jennifer, and one is owned by something called SVM Trust, which I'm still tracking down. My head was spinning. Lily has a company too, registered in 2023, called Aesthetic Consulting Services. According to the filings, it provides marketing and brand development services to Elegant Interiors for a fee.
Naturally, how much? 15% of gross revenue, which, based on the numbers I'm seeing, works out to about $60,000 a year. I thought about Lily working at a coffee shop, supposedly making minimum wage plus tips, supposedly struggling to figure out what she wanted to do with her life, all while collecting $60,000 a year from a company she probably didn't even know how to spell. And my sister-in-law? I asked, though I already knew the answer would be bad. Jennifer's company is called Morrison Property Management, LLC. It ostensibly manages Sarah's office space downtown, which, by the way, Sarah owns, not rents. She bought the building 3 years ago using business funds and never told you. The room tilted slightly. She owns the building. A commercial property in downtown valued at approximately $1.2 million, purchased in 2021 for $850,000. Now worth significantly more because of the neighborhood's development. And Jennifer's company manages it, collects rent from the other tenants, and takes a management fee of, you guessed it, 20%. This is insane, I said, though the word felt inadequate. It's fraud. It's tax fraud. It's very illegal, David interjected, and very, very deliberate. This isn't someone making mistakes or cutting corners. This is a systematic scheme to move marital assets into protected accounts while minimizing tax liability and hiding wealth from you. Patricia nodded. The genius of it, and I use that word loosely, is that on paper, everything looks legitimate. Sarah has real clients. She does real work. The LLCs are properly registered. The money moves through official channels, but the fees these companies charge are inflated beyond any reasonable market rate. And the owners of these companies are all people Sarah controls or influences, including our children, I said quietly. Including your children, Patricia confirmed, who I should mention have both been receiving regular payments from their respective companies. Marcus gets a monthly distribution from Renaissance Holdings, $4,000 a month, every month for the past 3 years. Lily's been getting $3,500 monthly since her company was formed. I did the math in my head. Marcus had collected over $140,000. Lily had collected over $60,000. All while pretending to need my money, to need my help, to need me to pay for college or cars or whatever else they claimed they couldn't afford. If you've ever felt the specific kind of heartbreak that comes from realizing your children see you as nothing more than an ATM, you'll understand the sound that came out of my throat. Not quite a laugh, not quite a sob, something in between. They knew. I said Marcus and Lily. They've known all along, almost certainly. Patricia said they're listed as company owners. They've been receiving payments. They would have had to sign formation documents, operating agreements, tax forms. This wasn't something Sarah did behind their backs. This was a family business, James. Just one you weren't invited to participate in. David pulled out his phone and showed me a screenshot. It was an Instagram post from Lily, dated 6 months ago. She was standing in front of a new BMW, keys in hand, caption reading, "Treated myself. Hard work pays off." That's a $50,000 car, David said. Purchased with cash from Aesthetic Consulting Services. She told you she was working at a coffee shop. She is working at a coffee shop, I said numbly. I've seen her there 10 hours a week, Patricia said, consulting her notes. Just enough to maintain the appearance of being a struggling young adult. Meanwhile, she's collecting more money annually than most people her age make in actual jobs. She flipped to another section, and I saw photographs, screenshots of social media posts. Lily at expensive restaurants. Lily on vacation in Mexico. Lily wearing designer clothes and carrying handbags that cost more than my monthly rent at the bunker. Marcus had been more subtle, or maybe just less active on social media, but there were still pictures. Marcus at a ski resort in Aspen. Marcus with courtside seats at a basketball game. Marcus wearing a watch I recognized as a Rolex, the kind that retails for $15,000 or more. My children living like trust fund kids while telling me they needed my money to survive. There's more, Patricia said. And I almost laughed because of course there was more. There was always more. She pulled out a different document. I found wire transfers from Elegant Interiors to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. Small amounts, $5,000 here, $10,000 there, but consistent. Over the past 3 years, approximately $180,000 has been moved offshore. Offshore, I repeated. Sarah has offshore accounts, at least one, possibly more. The Cayman Islands don't have transparent banking laws, so I can't see what's in the account or what it's being used for. But the money is going somewhere, and it's not being reported on your joint tax returns. David leaned forward. James, this is worse than we thought. This isn't just hiding money from you, this is tax evasion on a significant scale. The IRS could come after her for this. Criminal charges are a real possibility. Good, I said, and I meant it. Let them come after her. Let her face consequences for once in her life. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't that simple. Because if the IRS came after Sarah for filing fraudulent joint tax returns, they'd come after me too. I'd signed those returns. I'd claimed ignorance, but ignorance isn't a defense when your name is on the documents. Patricia must have seen something in my face because she said, "Don't worry about the IRS yet. We can establish that you had no knowledge of the offshore accounts or the shell companies. You can claim innocent spouse relief, but we need to be strategic about how we present this information." "What do you mean?" David answered. "We mean that we have leverage now. Serious leverage. Sarah has committed multiple felonies. Tax evasion, bank fraud, possibly wire fraud, depending on how those offshore transfers were structured. She's looking at prison time if this goes public, which means she has every incentive to settle this divorce quietly and favorably. Favorably to me, I clarified. Very favorably to you, David confirmed. We're talking about reclaiming half of all the hidden assets, the property downtown, a share of the offshore accounts, reimbursement for the money that should have been reported as marital income but was funneled into shell companies. Plus, punitive damages for fraud. Patricia pulled out a calculator and started punching numbers. Conservatively, if we can prove even half of what I found, you're entitled to somewhere between $800,000 and $1.2 million in total settlement. The number hung in the air like smoke. $800,000 over $1 million. Money that had been ours, that I'd helped earn through my salary and my stability and my willingness to work 60-hour weeks while Sarah built her empire. Money that she'd systematically stolen and hidden and pretended didn't exist. What's our next move? I asked. We file an emergency motion for financial discovery and asset preservation, David said. We tell the judge we have evidence of fraud and request that all of Sarah's accounts be frozen pending full disclosure. We force her to produce every document, every bank statement, every wire transfer record. And while we're doing that, we present her with a settlement offer. What kind of offer? The kind that makes it clear we know everything. The offshore accounts, the shell companies, the fake consulting fees, all of it. We offer her a choice. Settle fairly, split the marital assets 50-50, including the hidden money, sign a non-disclosure agreement, and we don't report any of this to the IRS. Or we go to court, expose everything, and let the chips fall where they may. She'll never agree to that. I said she'll fight. Maybe. Patricia said, but fighting means discovery. It means depositions where she has to answer questions under oath. It means subpoenas for her sister Jennifer, for Marcus, for Lily. It means all of this becoming public record. Is she willing to risk that? Is she willing to risk her children being implicated in tax fraud? I thought about Sarah's call, the desperation in her voice when she begged me to meet with her, the 73 unanswered calls, the increasing panic. She knew I'd found something. She just didn't know how much. When do we move? I asked. Today, David said. I'll file the motion this afternoon. And James, I need you to do something for me. What? I need you to meet with Sarah face to face tomorrow if possible. I stared at him. You just said I know what I said, but we need to see how she reacts when confronted with what we know. We need to gauge whether she's willing to negotiate or whether she's going to try to bluff her way through this. And we need you to record the conversation. Record it. Is that legal in this state? Yes. As long as one party to the conversation consents, you'll consent. You'll wear a recording device, and you'll ask her specific questions about the offshore accounts, about the shell companies, about Marcus and Lily's involvement. We need her to either confess or lie. Either way, we get evidence. The thought of sitting across from Sarah, of looking her in the eye and pretending I didn't know what I knew, made my stomach turn. But I understood the strategy, understood that this was how we'd win. Not with anger or accusations, but with careful documentation and ironclad proof. Okay, I said. I'll do it. Patricia closed her binder and looked at me with something that might have been respect. Mr. Morrison, I've worked hundreds of cases like this. Spouses hiding money, families conspiring to defraud their own members, and I've seen victims respond in every way imaginable. Rage, denial, capitulation, despair. But you know what I rarely see? What? Clarity. The ability to set aside emotion and focus on the facts. Most people can't do that. They're too hurt, too angry, too destroyed by the betrayal. That you've managed to keep your head clear enough to actually fight back. That's rare. I don't feel clear, I admitted. I feel like I'm drowning most of the time. Then you're a very good actor, she said, because from where I'm sitting, you look like someone who's finally figured out how to swim. I left David's office 2 hours later with a folder full of evidence, a recording device the size of a USB drive, and instructions for the meeting with Sarah. David would reach out to her lawyer, suggest a face-to-face mediation session, frame it as a good-faith attempt to resolve things amicably. Sarah would agree. She had to, because the alternative was watching everything she'd built collapse into a very public, very ugly legal battle. I drove back to the bunker in midday traffic, the sun bright and harsh overhead. And I thought about my children, about Marcus and Lily, who'd stood in that ballroom and disowned me while knowing they'd been stealing from me for years, who'd looked me in the eye and demanded more money while collecting thousands of dollars a month from companies I didn't know existed. Had they ever loved me? Or had I always been nothing more than a resource to be exploited? A checkbook with a heartbeat? I didn't have an answer. Wasn't sure I'd ever have an answer. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to be exploited anymore. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I almost deleted it without reading, but something made me open it. Dad, it's Marcus. I know you're angry. I know you probably hate me right now, but there are things you don't understand. Things Mom did that I didn't agree with. Can we please just talk? Just you and me? I'll tell you everything. I promise. I stared at the message for a long time. Was it real? Was Marcus actually feeling guilty, actually wanting to confess and make things right? Or was this just another manipulation, another attempt to find out what I knew and control the narrative? I typed a response. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., the coffee grind on Maple Street. Come alone. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. If Marcus wanted to talk, I'd listen, but I'd be recording every word, and I'd finally find out if my son was capable of telling me the truth. There's a specific kind of nervousness that comes from preparing to interrogate your own child. It sits in your chest like a stone, heavy and cold, and no amount of deep breathing or mental preparation can make it lighter. I arrived at the coffee grind 45 minutes early, ordered a black coffee I didn't drink, sat at a table in the back corner where I could see the door, but where we'd have relative privacy. And I checked the recording device for the third time, making sure it was positioned correctly in my shirt pocket, making sure the microphone wasn't obscured by fabric. David had given me explicit instructions. Let Marcus talk. Don't lead him. Don't make accusations. Just ask open-ended questions and let him fill the silence. People who feel guilty want to confess. People who are lying will eventually contradict themselves. Either way, we'd get something useful. But David didn't have to sit across from his son and pretend not to know that his son had been stealing from him for 3 years. David didn't have to look into eyes that used to be full of trust and wonder and love and see only calculation. The coffee shop was moderately busy. The afternoon crowd, mostly students with laptops and headphones, a few business people on late lunches. There was a hiss of the espresso machine, the murmur of conversation, acoustic guitar music playing just loud enough to provide cover without being intrusive. Good for a recording. Ambient noise meant authenticity. At 1:58 p.m., Marcus walked through the door. He looked different than he had at the party, less polished, more human. He was wearing jeans and a university hoodie, his hair slightly messy, like he'd been running his hands through it. There were dark circles under his eyes, and when he spotted me in the corner, something flickered across his face that might have been genuine relief, or might have been a very good performance. He approached slowly, hands shoved in his pockets, shoulders slightly hunched, defensive body language. Nervous. "Dad," he said when he reached the table. "Thanks for meeting me." I gestured to the chair across from me. "Sit." He sat, looked at my untouched coffee, glanced around the shop like he was checking for witnesses or maybe just buying time to figure out what to say. "Do you want something to drink?" I asked. "No, I'm fine." He paused. "Actually, yes, I'll be right back." He went to the counter and ordered something. I couldn't hear what. When he came back, he was carrying a large iced coffee and his hands were shaking enough that the ice rattled against the plastic cup. We sat in silence for a moment. Marcus took a sip of his coffee, put it down, picked it up again, put it down again. Finally looked at me. "I don't know where to start," he said. "Start at the beginning," I suggested. "Start with Renaissance Investment Holdings." His face went pale. Not surprise. Exactly. He'd known. I'd found out, had known. That's why I was willing to meet. But hearing me say the name out loud still hit him like a physical blow. "How did you?" He stopped, shook his head. "It doesn't matter. You know. Okay, you know. I know you own a company that's been taking 25% of your mother's business profits for 3 years, I said, keeping my voice level. I know you've been collecting about $4,000 a month. I know you handed me a bill for $148,000 while sitting on over $140,000 in distributions. What I don't know is why." Marcus's jaw worked like he was trying to find words and failing. He looked down at his coffee and I saw his eyes getting red. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," he said finally. "It wasn't. I didn't want any of this. Then explain it to me. Make me understand." He took a shaky breath. "Mom came to me 3 years ago, said she needed my help with something. Said she was growing the business, but that she needed to restructure how the money flowed for tax purposes. She said it was normal that lots of business owners do it, that it would help her save money on taxes, and that she'd share the savings with me. And you believed her." "I was 19, Dad. I didn't know anything about business or taxes, I just knew Mom was asking for my help and it sounded legitimate. If you've ever wanted to believe someone so badly that you ignored every warning sign, every red flag, every voice in your head telling you something was wrong, you'll understand why I almost believed him. Almost." "So you signed the formation documents," I said. "Set up the company in your name. Mom did most of it. I just signed where she told me to sign. And then a few months later, money started showing up in an account she'd set up for me. She said it was my share of the business profits that I'd earned by being a partner. Did you ask what you'd done to earn it?" Marcus looked at me then, and there was something raw in his expression. I asked if it was legal, if we were doing anything wrong, and Mom said, No, it was all perfectly legitimate that rich people do this kind of thing all the time, and that's how they stay rich. And you never questioned it again? I questioned it, he said, a flash of defensiveness in his voice. I questioned it a lot, actually. But Mom kept saying it was fine. And I wanted to believe her because the money was. Dad, do you know how stressful college is? How expensive? I had tuition and rent and books, and I was trying to maintain my grades and have some kind of social life, and the money made everything easier. It made everything possible. Except I was already paying your tuition, I said quietly. We had a college fund, or we should have had a college fund. Where did that money go, Marcus? He looked away. I don't know. You don't know, or you don't want to tell me? I don't know, he insisted. Mom handled all that. She just told me the fund wasn't enough to cover everything and that I'd need to take out loans or get help from other sources. Other sources like a shell company funneling stolen marital assets and the invoice. I asked the $148,000 you handed me at the party. Marcus flinched. That was Mom's idea. She said you needed to understand the value of education, the cost of raising kids. She said you'd been distant and uninvolved and that you needed to step up and contribute while you were collecting $4,000 a month. I know how it looks, he said, his voice cracking. I know it looks like I was stealing from you, but I swear, Dad, I didn't know. Not at first. Not until... He trailed off, looking miserable. Not until when? I prompted. Not until about 6 months ago. Mom called a family meeting, just her, me, and Lily. Said she was going to divorce you and that she needed us to be on her side, she explained. She explained the whole thing, the companies, the money, how it had been flowing through our accounts to keep it separate from marital assets. And how did you react when you learned that? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I freaked out. I told her it sounded illegal. I told her I didn't want to be involved, but she said it was too late, that my name was already on documents, that if anyone investigated, I'd be implicated too. She said the only way to protect myself was to stick with the plan being to destroy me in front of 100 people. The plan being to make the divorce happen quickly and cleanly. She said, if we made it dramatic enough, if we shocked you enough, you wouldn't fight it. You just accept it and move on. And Lily, what about her company? Same thing. Mom set it up a year ago, told Lily it was a legitimate consulting business, got her to sign the paperwork. Lily's been getting money too, but less than me, about $3,500 a month. I thought about Lily laughing as she took my car keys. Lily posting pictures of her new BMW on Instagram. Lily working 10 hours a week at a coffee shop while collecting more money than most college graduates make. Does Lily know it's fraud? I asked. Marcus hesitated. I think she knows it's questionable. But Mom's convinced her that it's not illegal, just smart financial planning. And Lily's always been closer to Mom than to you, so she believes what Mom tells her. There it was. The truth beneath the truth. Lily had always been Sarah's daughter, her more than mine. Even when she was little, even when she'd climb on my lap and ask me to read her stories, there had been a part of her that belonged exclusively to her mother. A secret language between them that I was never quite fluent in. And the party? I asked. Whose idea was the public humiliation? Marcus looked genuinely pained. That was all, Mom. She planned every detail, invited everyone, coordinated with Gary from your firm, wrote out what each of us should say. Lily and I practiced our lines like it was a play. You practiced telling me I was nothing but a sperm donor. He flinched again, harder this time. I didn't want to say that. I told Mom it was too cruel, but she said you needed to hear it. That you needed to understand how we really felt and how do you really feel? The question hung between us like a challenge. Marcus looked at me, really looked at me for the first time since sitting down. And what I saw in his eyes was complicated guilt, shame, confusion. But underneath it all, something that might have been love, buried deep, twisted up with resentment and years of narrative poisoning, but still there. Maybe.
I feel like I don't know you, he said finally. I feel like you were always at work or always tired or always somewhere else. I feel like Mom raised us basically by herself while you were off being successful at your job. And I'm angry about that. But I'm also, he paused, struggling. I'm also angry at Mom for making me part of this, for using me, for turning me into someone who could stand in front of 100 people and humiliate his own father. You could have said no. Could I? He asked, and there was real anguish in his voice. You don't know what it's like with her, Dad. You don't know how she works. She doesn't yell or threaten. She makes you feel like you're letting her down if you don't do what she wants. She makes you feel guilty for even questioning her. I knew exactly what he meant. Had lived with that dynamic for 23 years. Sarah's particular gift was making you feel like every disagreement was a moral failing on your part, like every question was a betrayal. So you went along with it, I said. You stood there and said your lines and handed me that invoice and watched me walk out. I hated every second of it, Marcus said, and tears were running down his face now. I hated myself. I've hated myself every day since. I tried to call you, tried to apologize, but you wouldn't answer. And I didn't blame you because what could I possibly say that would make it okay? He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, looking young and lost, and nothing like the cold, calculating person who'd faced me in that ballroom. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Because Mom's panicking, he said. She's been calling emergency meetings, talking to lawyers, asking me and Lily about what we've told you. She's scared, Dad. Really scared. And when I asked her why, she wouldn't tell me. But I could tell it's because you found something. Something big. I didn't confirm or deny, just waited. Marcus leaned forward, his voice urgent. Whatever you found, whatever you're planning to do, I want you to know that I'll testify. I'll tell the truth about how the companies were set up, how Mom controlled everything, how she used us. I'll give you whatever you need. Why? I asked. Why would you do that? Because it's the right thing to do. And because he swallowed hard. Because you're my dad. And I've spent 3 years letting Mom convince me that you didn't matter, that you were just a paycheck, that you didn't love us. But sitting here now looking at you, I don't think that's true. I think you did love us. Maybe not perfectly, maybe not enough, but you tried. And I threw that away for money I didn't even earn. The words hit harder than I expected. I prepared myself for manipulation, for lies, for Marcus trying to play both sides. But this felt real. This felt like actual remorse, or maybe I just wanted it to be real so badly that I was willing to ignore my better judgment. Marcus, I said carefully, if you testify against your mother, it could destroy your relationship with her. It could destroy your relationship with Lily. Are you prepared for that? I don't know, he admitted. Probably not. But I also can't keep living like this. I can't keep cashing checks from a company that exists just to steal from you. I can't keep pretending this is normal or okay or anything other than what it is. I studied his face, looking for tells, for signs of deception, but all I saw was a 21-year-old kid who'd gotten in way over his head and was trying to find a way out. I need to ask you something, I said, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Okay. Does your mother have other accounts? Other places where she's hiding money that I don't know about? Marcus hesitated, and I saw the war playing out across his features. Loyalty to his mother versus loyalty to me,
Self-preservation versus honesty. There's an offshore account, he said finally, in the Cayman Islands. Mom mentioned it once when she was explaining how the money flowed. She said it was for emergencies, for protecting assets in case anything went wrong. How much is in it? I don't know. She never told me specifics, but based on the way she talked about it, I'd guess it's a lot, maybe hundreds of thousands. I nodded slowly, filing this away. Patricia had already found the transfers to the Cayman account, but hearing Marcus confirm it independently was valuable. Anything else? I asked. Any other secrets you think I should know? Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then, Aunt Jennifer, Mom's sister. She's not just running the property management company, she's also getting a cut of everything, like 10% of all the profits that flow through the shell companies. Mom calls it a consulting fee. So, Jennifer was in on it too. Sarah's whole family apparently conspiring to rob me blind. Why are you telling me this? I asked again. Really? What do you want from me? Marcus looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. I want you to forgive me. Someday. Not now. I know that's impossible, but someday, when this is all over and the dust has settled, I want to be able to call you Dad again, without feeling like a fraud. I want to be able to look at myself in the mirror and not hate what I see. The vulnerability in his voice was almost unbearable. This was my son, my boy, the kid I'd taught to throw a baseball, the teenager I'd helped with calculus homework, the young man I'd driven to college on his first day and felt simultaneously proud and heartbroken watching him walk away into his own life. And he'd been turned into a weapon against me, used by Sarah like a tool, like a prop in her elaborate scheme. But he was also here now, confessing, offering to help. And that had to mean something. I can't promise forgiveness, I said honestly. Not yet. What you did, what all of you did, it broke something in me. Something I'm not sure can be fixed. I know, Marcus said. I know, I had to try. We sat in silence for a moment. Around us, the coffee shop continued its mundane operation. Students typing papers, baristas making drinks. Life moving forward for everyone except us, frozen in this moment of terrible honesty. I need you to do something for me, I said finally. Anything. I need you to write down everything you just told me. Every detail about how the companies were set up, what your mother said when you found out it was fraud, dates, amounts, conversations, everything. Okay, I can do that. And I need you to not tell your mother we met, not tell Lily, not tell anyone. As far as they know, you tried to reach me and I ignored you. Marcus nodded. She's going to ask. She's going to want to know if I found out what you know. Tell her I wouldn't talk to you. Tell her I'm still too angry. Can you do that? Yes. I pulled out my phone and opened a new note. Give me your email address, the real one, not the school one. Something your mother doesn't have access to. He gave it to me and I typed it in. I'm going to send you an encrypted email address. You'll write everything down and send it there. No one else can see it. No one else can access it. Understand? Yes, sir. Sir. He hadn't called me that since he was 12 years old, back when he still thought I knew everything, back when I was still a hero instead of a disappointment. I stood up. The coffee I'd ordered sat untouched and cold on the table between us. Marcus, I said, thank you for telling me the truth, or what I hope is the truth. I guess we'll find out. He stood too, looking like he wanted to hug me, but didn't dare try. Dad, I really am sorry for everything. I know, I said, but sorry doesn't fix this. Actions fix this. So, write down everything you know, send it to me, and then we'll see what happens next. I left him standing there in the coffee shop, looking small and lost and young. walked out into the bright afternoon sun, and got in my car and drove 3 blocks before pulling over because my hands were shaking too badly to hold the steering wheel. I sat there in a random parking lot and let myself feel everything I'd been holding back during that conversation. The anger, the grief, the hope that maybe, just maybe, not everything was lost. Then I pulled out my phone and called David. "How did it go?" he asked. He confessed. "Everything. The shell companies, the offshore account, his mother's involvement," he said. "He'll testify." "Do you believe him?" I thought about Marcus's tears, his shame, his desperate plea for eventual forgiveness. I thought about the recording device in my pocket that had captured every word. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But we have it all on tape either way." "Good," David said, "because tomorrow you meet with Sarah, and now we know exactly what questions to ask." The restaurant Sarah chose was expensive and public, a calculated decision. I realized somewhere she could maintain control, somewhere I couldn't make a scene without witnesses. It was called Seasons, one of those places with minimalist decor and plates that cost $50 but only contained 3 artfully arranged bites of food. We'd eaten here before, years ago, an anniversary dinner, maybe our 15th or 16th. I remembered Sarah wearing a blue dress and laughing about something. Remembered thinking how beautiful she looked in the candlelight. How lucky I was to have built a life with this woman. That memory felt like it belonged to someone else now. Someone naive enough to believe that shared meals and anniversary dinners meant anything at all. I arrived exactly on time, 6 p.m. on a Thursday evening. The restaurant was moderately busy with the early dinner crowd, mostly business people and couples who looked like they were trying to save a dying relationship through expensive wine. The hostess greeted me with professional warmth and led me to a corner table where Sarah was already waiting. She stood when she saw me approaching, an old habit, a gesture of politeness that felt absurdly formal given everything that had happened. She was wearing a black dress, not the one from the party, but similar, elegant, expensive. Her hair was styled in soft waves, and she'd done her makeup carefully. She looked like she was going to a business meeting, which I supposed she was. "James," she said, her voice neutral. "Thank you for coming, Sarah." We sat. A waiter appeared immediately with menus and water, asked if we wanted to hear the specials. Sarah ordered a glass of white wine. I ordered nothing. The waiter disappeared with a knowing look that said he'd seen this dynamic before. The tense silence, the careful distance, the divorce dinner. The recording device in my shirt pocket felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. "You look thin," Sarah said, studying my face. "Have you been eating? Is that really what you want to talk about?" My eating habits. She had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "No, I suppose not. You look different. Tired." "I've had a difficult couple of weeks, as you might imagine." Sarah took a sip of her wine when it arrived, buying time. When she set the glass down, she folded her hands on the table, a gesture I recognized from countless arguments over the years. It was her negotiation pose, the one she used when she wanted to appear reasonable while getting exactly what she wanted. "I owe you an apology," she said. The party was excessive, cruel even. I let my anger get the better of me and I handled things badly. "Handled things badly," I repeated. That's one way to describe orchestrating my public humiliation. "I know you're angry. I'm not angry, Sarah. I'm something else entirely. But we can get to that. First, tell me why I'm here. Your lawyer said you wanted to meet face-to-face to discuss settlement terms without mediation. So discuss." She seemed thrown by my directness, by the lack of emotion in my voice. She'd probably expected me to be furious or hurt or broken. Instead, I was just calm. Eerily calm. The calm that comes from having all the cards and knowing exactly how to play them. "I want this to be fair," she said carefully. "I know the divorce papers I sent were aggressive. My lawyer convinced me to ask for more than I expected to get. Said it was standard negotiating practice, but I'm willing to be reasonable." Reasonable, I said. Define reasonable. Split the assets 50-50.
You keep your retirement accounts, I keep the business. We sell the house and divide the proceeds. Clean break. No alimony on either side. It sounded almost fair. Would have sounded fair if I didn't know what I knew and the business, I asked. How are you valuing it? My accountant assessed it at $200,000 between the client list, the reputation, the office equipment. Your accountant, I interrupted, valued a business that's been generating over $500,000 a year in revenue at $200,000? Sarah's face went very still. The revenue fluctuates and there are expenses overhead. Overhead like the fees paid to Renaissance Investment Holdings, like the consulting fees paid to Aesthetic Consulting Services, like the property management fees paid to Morrison Property Management. I watched the color drain from her face, watched her fingers tighten around her wine glass, watched her realize with crystal and clarity that I knew. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, but her voice had lost its confidence. Don't you? That's strange because I have partnership agreements with all three of those companies. I have bank statements showing the transfers. I have incorporation documents showing who owns them. I paused, letting that sink in. Marcus owns Renaissance Holdings. Lily owns Aesthetic Consulting. Your sister Jennifer owns Morrison Property Management. Want to guess what they all have in common? Sarah sat down her wine glass very carefully, like she was afraid she might break it. James, they're shell companies, I continued, my voice still calm, still level. Vehicles you created to funnel marital assets into protected accounts. 25% to Marcus, 15% to Lily, 20% to Jennifer. 60% of your actual income hidden from me, hidden from the IRS, hidden from the court. That's not. She stopped, regrouped. You don't understand. Those are legitimate business expenses, are they? Because I spoke with a forensic accountant and she seemed to think otherwise. She seemed to think that paying your college student son $4,000 a month for doing absolutely nothing was not, in fact, a legitimate business expense. If you've ever watched someone's carefully constructed facade crack in real time, you'll know what I saw in Sarah's face. Fear, panic, the realization that the game was over and she'd lost. Who did you hire? She asked. What accountant? Does it matter? The point is, I know about the shell companies. I know about the offshore account in the Cayman Islands. I know you've been systematically hiding over $1 million in income over the past 5 years. You can't prove that, she said, but there was no conviction in her voice. I can prove all of it. I have documents, I have bank records, I have testimony from Marcus who's willing to explain exactly how you set this whole thing up. Marcus wouldn't. She stopped again, and I saw understanding dawn. You met with Marcus. He told you. He confessed everything. He's done being your accomplice, Sarah. She sat back in her chair, and for a moment she looked smaller, older, like the weight of her deception was finally pressing down on her shoulders. Why? I asked, the question I'd been holding back finally breaking free. Why did you do this? If you wanted a divorce, you could have just asked for one. We could have split things fairly and both moved on. Why the theft? Why the lies? Why involve our children? Sarah was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was different, softer, more honest, stripped of its careful control. Because I was scared, she said. When I started the business, I was terrified it would fail. Terrified I'd invested all that time and energy and money into something that wouldn't work. And you? She looked at me. You were supportive, but you were also distant. You didn't really care about the business beyond whether it was making money. You didn't care about the clients or the design work or what it meant to me. So you stole from me because I wasn't enthusiastic enough about fabric swatches. I didn't steal, she said, defensive now. I protected what I built. The business was mine, my vision, my work, my success,
And I knew that if we got divorced, you'd be entitled to half of it.
Half of something you never cared about, never supported, never even paid attention to unless I was reporting the year-end revenue. It was built with marital funds, I said. My salary, my health insurance that covered you while you were getting established, my stability that allowed you to take the risk of starting a business in the first place. That makes it marital property, Sarah. That's not stealing. That's the law. The law, she said bitterly. You want to talk about the law? You worked 60 hours a week for 20 years. You missed birthdays and anniversaries and school plays. You came home exhausted and fell asleep in front of the television. Where's the law that compensates me for raising our children essentially alone? Where's the law that pays me back for all the emotional labor of holding this family together while you were busy being important at your firm? There it was. The real grievance, not the money. The resentment. Years of it building up like sediment, layer upon layer until she couldn't see me as anything but an obstacle to be removed. I was working to support our family. You were hiding, she countered. Hiding from the messy parts of life, from the emotional complexity of having a family, from having to actually be present for the people who needed you. Work was your excuse, your escape hatch. And I got tired of it. I got tired of being married to someone who was there but not there. So I decided I was done, and I decided that if I was going to end it, I was going to protect what was mine by committing fraud, by being smart. She said, "Rich people do this all the time, James. They structure their assets to minimize taxes and protect wealth. That's all I did. It's not illegal. It's just strategic. It's illegal when you don't report it on joint tax returns. I said it's illegal when you create shell companies for the sole purpose of hiding income from your spouse. It's illegal when you move money offshore without declaring it. And you know it's illegal, Sarah, because you went to tremendous lengths to hide it from me." She pressed her lips together, and I could see her mind working, trying to find an angle, a way to spin this. "What do you want?" she asked finally. "You clearly didn't come here just to confront me, so what do you want?" This was it. The moment David and Patricia had prepared me for. The moment where I either destroyed Sarah completely or gave her a chance to salvage something from the wreckage. I want an honest accounting of all assets. I said every account, every company, every offshore holding. I want a fair split, a real 50-50 split, not the fantasy split where you keep the $1 million you hid and I get whatever's left. And I want reimbursement from Marcus's college fund that you spent on building your business. That's insane. I don't have that kind of liquid cash. Then you'll need to sell assets or take out a loan against the business or liquidate some of those offshore accounts. I don't particularly care how you do it, but you will make it right. Sarah laughed, but it was a hollow sound. And if I refuse, what then? You'll take me to court? Expose all of this to a judge if necessary? Yes, you'd do that? She asked, and there was something almost like disbelief in her voice. You'd drag Marcus and Lily through a public trial? You'd risk them facing criminal charges? They're adults, I said, echoing her own words from the party. They made their own decisions. If there are consequences, they'll have to face them. You don't mean that. Don't I? You stood in front of 100 people and destroyed me, Sarah. You had Marcus call me a sperm donor. You had Lily laugh while taking my car. You orchestrated my firing, my humiliation, my complete and total annihilation. And you did it because you thought I was too weak, too broken, too pathetic to fight back. So tell me, why shouldn't I do exactly the same thing to you? She stared at me and I saw fear there now, real fear. Not the fear of losing money or assets, but the fear of consequences she'd never seriously considered. Because you're not like me, she said quietly. You're not cruel. I'm not cruel. I agreed, but I'm also not stupid. Not anymore. A waiter appeared asking if we were ready to order. We both said no. He left confused.
Sarah picked up her wine glass, realized it was empty, set it back down. How much time do I have to do? What? To liquidate assets, to get you the money you're asking for. That depends on how cooperative you are. If you agree to full financial disclosure immediately, if you agree to the settlement terms I'm proposing, if you agree to sign an amended divorce agreement that reflects the actual value of marital assets, then we can work out a payment plan.
60 days, maybe 90. And if I don't agree, then I file an emergency motion for asset preservation tomorrow morning. The judge freezes all your accounts pending investigation. Your business operations halt. Your offshore accounts get reported to the IRS, and you spend the next year explaining to various authorities exactly how you thought any of this was legal. Sarah's hands were trembling. I watched her try to control them, watched her fail. "You've changed," she said, and there was something like wonder in her voice. "No," I replied. "I've just stopped pretending. For 23 years, I pretended that working hard was the same as being present. I pretended that providing financially was the same as providing emotionally. I pretended that our marriage was fine because I didn't want to deal with the fact that it wasn't. And you pretended you were building a business when you were really building an exit strategy. Pretended you cared about fairness when you were really just protecting yourself. We were both living in a fantasy, Sarah. The only difference is I'm not anymore." She looked at me for a long moment, and I couldn't read her expression. Regret? Anger? Respect? Maybe all three. "I'll need to talk to my lawyer," she said. "Talk to whoever you want, but I need an answer by Monday. Full disclosure and fair settlement, or we go to war. Your choice." I stood up, leaving 220 seconds on the table for the wine and water we'd barely touched. "James," Sarah said, and I stopped. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. For the party, for using the kids, for all of it. You deserved better than that." "Yes," I said. "I did." I walked out of the restaurant into the cool evening air, and it felt like walking out of a prison. My legs were shaky, my heart was racing, but I felt lighter than I had in weeks, maybe months, maybe years. The recording device had captured everything. Every admission, every justification, every moment where Sarah had confirmed exactly what I'd suspected. David would have his evidence. Patricia would have her ammunition, and I would have my leverage. I got in my car and sat there for a moment, letting the adrenaline fade, letting myself feel the full weight of what had just happened. I'd confronted my wife, my soon-to-be ex-wife, and I hadn't flinched, hadn't backed down, hadn't let her manipulate me into feeling guilty or wrong or responsible for her choices. My phone buzzed. A text from David. "How did it go?" I typed back, "She knows we have her. Monday deadline for settlement. She'll fold." 3 dots appeared then. "I never doubted you. Come by the office tomorrow. We'll prepare for whatever she decides." I started the car and drove back to the bunker, back to my temporary home with its Murphy bed and sparking microwave. But it didn't feel depressing anymore. It felt like a command center, a place where I'd rebuilt myself from nothing into someone who could stand up to the person who'd tried to destroy him. When I got back to my apartment, there was an email waiting from the address Marcus had sent his statement to. I opened it, and there, 20 pages of detailed confession, dates, amounts, conversations, everything Marcus knew about Sarah's scheme. At the bottom, he'd written, "Dad, I know this doesn't fix anything. I know I have a long way to go to earn back even a fraction of your trust. But this is the truth, all of it, and you can do whatever you need to do with it. I'm ready to face whatever consequences come. I just wanted you to know that I see you now. Really see you. And I'm sorry it took long you to understand what I had. I love you. I hope someday you can believe that again, Marcus." I sat there in the dark reading those words over and over again, feeling something crack open in my chest. Not forgiveness,
Not yet. But maybe the beginning of it, the possibility of it. My son had chosen me over his mother, had chosen truth over self-preservation, had chosen the hard right over the easy wrong. It didn't erase what he'd done, didn't make the pain disappear,
But it was something. A foundation, maybe, on which we could eventually rebuild.
I closed the laptop and looked around my small apartment at the life I'd been forced to build from scratch. And for the first time since that terrible birthday party, I felt something that wasn't anger or grief or hollow determination. I felt hope. Real hope. The kind that whispers that maybe, just maybe, the worst is over and something better is coming. I didn't know if that was true. Didn't know what Sarah would decide on Monday. Didn't know if Marcus's confession would be enough. Didn't know if my life would ever feel normal again. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I wasn't the same man who'd walked into that ballroom 2 weeks ago. That man was gone. And the man who'd replaced him was stronger, smarter, and done being anyone's victim. Whatever came next, I'd be ready. Monday morning arrived like a held breath, finally released. I woke at dawn, unable to sleep past the moment when gray light started filtering through the single window of my apartment. The Murphy bed had refused to fold up the night before, so I just left it extended, a monument to all the small dysfunctions of my temporary life. I made coffee on the hot plate. The microwave had finally died completely, sparking one last time before going dark, and sat at my small table, waiting. Sarah's deadline was noon. 12 hours for her to decide whether to settle fairly or face the consequences of everything I discovered. 12 hours that felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting to see if I'd fly or fall. My phone sat silent on the table. No calls, no texts. The quiet felt ominous, like the stillness before a storm. At 8:47 a.m., David called. "Her lawyer just contacted me," he said without preamble. "They want to meet this morning, 10 o'clock at my office. Sarah, her lawyer, you and me. She's settling. She's coming to the table. Whether she's actually settling or just buying time, we'll find out." I arrived at David's office at 9:30, early, but I needed the time to center myself, to remember that I was walking into this meeting with leverage, with evidence, with power. The scared, broken man from the birthday party was gone. The man who'd signed documents without reading them, who trusted blindly, who'd let himself be managed and manipulated. That man didn't exist anymore. This version of me was different, harder, clearer, ready. Sarah and her lawyer arrived exactly at 10. Her lawyer was a woman named Victoria Chen. Sleek, expensive suit, the kind of calculated confidence that comes from winning more cases than you lose. Sarah looked exhausted. Her makeup was careful, but I could see the dark circles underneath, the tightness around her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and mounting panic. Good. We sat across from each other at David's conference table. David and me on one side, Sarah and Victoria on the other. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. Lines drawn, sides chosen, battle positions established. Victoria spoke first. "My client is here in good faith to discuss settlement terms. However, I want to state clearly that we dispute many of the allegations Mr. Morrison has made regarding—" "Let's skip the posturing," David interrupted. "We have documentation for everything. Bank records, partnership agreements, testimony from your client's son, a recording of Mrs. Morrison admitting to the asset concealment scheme. You're not here to dispute anything. You're here because you know we have her dead to rights, and you're trying to minimize the damage." Victoria's jaw tightened, but she didn't argue. Instead, she pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. A settlement proposal. "We believe it's more than fair given the circumstances." I opened the folder. Legal language, dense paragraphs, numbers scattered throughout, but the essential terms were clear enough. Sarah would disclose all assets, including the offshore accounts. The marital estate would be valued at its true worth, approximately $2.3 million, including the business, the hidden accounts, and the real property. We'd split everything 50-50. She'd reimburse me $40,000 for Marcus's college fund. In exchange, I'd sign a non-disclosure agreement and agree not to report any of the financial irregularities to the IRS or other authorities. I looked up at Sarah. She was staring at the table, her hands folded in front of her. The picture of contrition. $40,000, I said, for a college fund that should have been worth over $100,000. The remainder was reinvested in the business, Victoria said smoothly, which you're receiving half of in the settlement, so you're actually coming out ahead. I'm coming out ahead, I repeated flatly. After being defrauded for 5 years, after having my marriage destroyed in public, after being systematically robbed by my own family, I'm coming out ahead because you're finally offering me what I was legally entitled to all along. Mr. Morrison, Victoria began, but Sarah cut her off. Just say yes, James. Her voice was tired, defeated. Please, let's just end this. I looked at her, really looked at her, and tried to find some remnant of the woman I'd married, the woman who'd laughed at my terrible jokes, who'd cried when Marcus was born, who'd held my hand at my father's funeral. But I couldn't see her anymore. Maybe she'd never really existed. Maybe I'd just been in love with a performance, a carefully maintained illusion that had finally dissolved to reveal the calculating stranger underneath. No, I said. Sarah's head snapped up. What? The college fund reimbursement is $100,000, not $40,000. And I want it paid within 30 days, not stretched out over some payment plan you'll default on. That's unreasonable. Victoria said, my client doesn't have that kind of liquidity. Then she can take a loan against the business. She can liquidate some of her offshore accounts. She can sell her Mercedes. I don't care how she does it, but $100,000 in 30 days or we go to court. Victoria opened her mouth to argue, but Sarah put a hand on her arm. Fine. $100,000. 30 days. And one more thing, I continued. Lily returns the car. The title gets transferred back to me. She got it through fraud, and I want it back. The car was a gift, Victoria protested. The car was stolen property, I countered. Sarah transferred the title without my knowledge or consent. That's theft. So either Lily returns it voluntarily, or I report it stolen and let the police sort it out. Sarah's composure finally cracked. You do that to your own daughter? My own daughter laughed while taking my keys. My own daughter has been collecting $3,500 a month from a shell company while pretending to struggle on a coffee shop salary. My own daughter participated in my public humiliation. So yes, Sarah, I do that to my own daughter because she's not acting like my daughter. She's acting like your accomplice. The words hung in the air like smoke. I saw something flash across Sarah's face. Anger, maybe, or recognition that she'd finally pushed me too far. The car, David said quietly. By end of business today or Mr. Morrison files a police report. Victoria and Sarah exchanged a long look. Some silent communication passed between them. Finally, Victoria nodded. Agreed. We'll have the title transferred back and the vehicle returned to Mr. Morrison by 5 p.m. today. And the rest? David asked. The asset split, the timeline, the non-disclosure agreement. Acceptable, Victoria said. Pending review of the final documents. We'll have them drawn up by tomorrow, David said. Both parties signed by Friday. Divorce finalized within 60 days. It was done. After weeks of investigation, confrontation, and negotiation, it was actually done. I'd gotten everything I'd asked for, everything I was entitled to, and then some. Sarah would face financial consequences for what she'd done. I'd walk away with enough money to rebuild my life, to start over, to stop living in a studio apartment with a broken microwave. I should have felt triumphant, vindicated, victorious.
Instead, I just felt tired.
We stood, shook hands with cold professionalism. Sarah wouldn't look at me, kept her eyes fixed somewhere past my left shoulder, like I was a stranger she'd rather not acknowledge. As they were leaving, she paused at the door. "James," she said quietly, "I really am sorry, for what it's worth." "It's not worth much," I replied.
But I appreciate you saying it.
She nodded once and left, Victoria following close behind like a protective shadow. When they were gone, David let out a long breath. "Well, that was easier than I expected." "She knew she was caught," I said. "No point fighting when you've already lost." "True, but still getting her to agree to everything, especially the car and the full college fund reimbursement, that's a win, James, a real win." He was right. I knew he was right, but winning felt hollow somehow. Like I'd climbed a mountain, only to discover the view from the top was just more mountains stretching endlessly into the distance. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we wait for the documents, make sure everything is exactly as agreed, both parties sign, court approves the divorce, and then you're free." "Free?" The word echoed strangely.
Free to do what? Free to be who?
I left David's office and drove aimlessly for a while, not ready to go back to the bunker, not ready to be alone with my thoughts. Eventually, I found myself at a park I used to bring the kids to when they were small. There was a playground with swings and slides, a small pond with ducks, walking paths that wound through trees. Marcus had fallen off the monkey bars here once, scraped his knee badly. He'd cried, and I'd carried him to a bench and cleaned the wound with water from a drinking fountain. Told him he was brave, told him it would heal. He'd believed me then, had trusted me completely. When had that stopped? When had I become someone he could betray without hesitation? My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Lily's new number, probably. "Mom told me about the car. I'll have it ready for pickup at her office by 4 p.m. "I'm sorry, Dad, for everything." I stared at the message for a long moment. Sorry. Everyone was sorry. Marcus was sorry. Sarah was sorry. Now Lily was sorry. But sorry didn't change what they'd done. Didn't erase the memory of standing in that ballroom being destroyed piece by piece while 100 people watched. Sorry was just a word. Actions mattered more. I typed back, "Thank you for returning it. We'll talk when you're ready to have an honest conversation." Not before. I hit send and pocketed the phone. Sat on a bench facing the pond and watched ducks glide across the water, oblivious to human drama, focused only on the simple business of being alive. The sun was warm on my face. Spring was coming, even though it was still early in the year. New growth, fresh starts, all the cliches that people tell themselves when they're trying to believe that endings can also be beginnings. Maybe they were right. Maybe this was a beginning, not just an ending. I didn't know yet, but I was starting to believe I'd find out. 4 days later, they called all of them. Sarah first, then Marcus, then Lily. Frantic messages piling up in my voicemail, each one more desperate than the last. I listened to exactly none of them, because that morning Patricia had called with news. The IRS had received an anonymous tip about unreported offshore income. They were opening an investigation into Elegant Interiors and all associated entities. Sarah's accounts were frozen pending audit. I hadn't made the call, hadn't needed to. Turns out Jennifer, Sarah's sister, her co-conspirator in the property management scheme, had gotten nervous about her own exposure and decided to cooperate with authorities in exchange for immunity. Family loyalty only goes so far when prison becomes a possibility. The settlement we'd negotiated was void now. The investigation changed everything. Sarah would be lucky to keep her business license, let alone her freedom. Marcus and Lily would face questions about their shell companies, their distributions, their knowledge of the fraud. I should have felt satisfaction. Should have felt vindicated watching the whole elaborate scheme collapse under the weight of its own deception. Instead, I felt nothing. Just a profound, bone-deep exhaustion that comes from watching people you loved destroy themselves. I was standing at the window of my apartment, no longer the bunker in my mind, just a temporary stop on the way to somewhere better. When David called with the final news, "The house sold," he said. "Above asking price after Sarah's legal fees and the IRS penalties, your half comes to about $340,000. Combined with the settlement funds from the unfrozen personal accounts and your severance, you're looking at close to $500,000. $500,000. Enough to start over, enough to disappear if I wanted to." "Thank you," I said, "for everything. What will you do now?" I looked out the window at the parking lot, the strip mall, the ordinary landscape of my temporary exile. Then I looked past it to the mountains visible in the distance, peaks still covered in snow, waiting for spring. "I don't know yet," I said honestly, "but I'll figure it out." After we hung up, I sat down and wrote 2 letters, one to Marcus, one to Lily. Not forgiveness, I wasn't there yet, but acknowledgement. Recognition that they were still my children, even if they'd forgotten how to be my family. That someday, maybe we could find our way back to something resembling trust. I sealed the letters and set them on the table. Then I opened my laptop and bought a one-way ticket to Seattle. No reason, no plan, just a city I'd never been to, a place where nobody knew my story, where I could walk down the street without carrying the weight of what had been done to me. The flight left tomorrow at dawn. I looked around the small apartment one last time, the Murphy bed, the hot plate, the water-stained ceiling, and felt something surprising. Gratitude. This place had been my cocoon, the space where I'd transformed from victim to survivor, where I'd learned that silence could be strength and knowledge could be power, and that sometimes losing everything is the only way to discover what you're actually made of. I'd entered this apartment broken. I was leaving it whole. The sun was setting, painting everything gold. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow would be mine. And that was enough.